battle in the heart of Alabama caught our attention. Coal miners in one community, they've been on strike now for months.
Working as long as 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, in some of the most dangerous conditions.
I really think that the labor movement is the single greatest force for democracy in the history of the United States.
The story of Alabama is a story of not just resilience, but of militancy.
I say no contract, you say no code. No contract, no contract.
If we ain't all free, ain't none of us free.
You're listening to Alabama's only union talk radio show, The Valley Labor Report, with Adam Keller and Jacob Morrison.
Hello, Tennessee Valley. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host and fellow agitator, as always, Adam Keller, and we are broadcasting live online and on the radio from the heart of the Tennessee Valley, the Spice Radio studio in Huntsville, Alabama. Today, Alabamians are going to get some more transparency with economic incentives, but incentives already given will remain in the shadows. Michael Bailey talks to us about how to win the fight for better air quality. Bosses were fined for killing an Alabama worker, and campus workers are fighting for health care in Tuscaloosa. All that and more on today's program. If you want to be part of the show today, we've got a phone number, and the line is open today. We have, in the main show for the last couple of weeks, kept the lines closed until overtime, but we are live now, and we have the phone lines open. That's 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. If you've got anything you would like to contribute during the program, any comments on topics that we're talking about, questions, anything like that, you can give us a call at 844-899-8857. You can also leave a voicemail or send us a text message throughout the week. Speaking of throughout the week, if you haven't gotten enough of us by the time that we wrap up here on the radio, or if you just want to see what we're up to while we are not live, you can follow us anywhere you find anything online. In particular, we've got a website that you should bookmark. Make it part of your home tabs. That is TVLR.fm. We release new articles multiple times throughout the week. And this week in particular, we had a lot of new articles, some original reporting, some local commentary and analysis, some commentary and analysis on the Teamsters stuff, summaries of segments from our last show, all good stuff at tvlr.fm. You can also find us, of course, on YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, all those good places at the Valley Labor Report. Just a reminder, your support helps us stay on the air, folks. If you're just listening to us online, you may not know that we are live on terrestrial radio, basically as paid programming, right? And we believe that that is an important and valuable medium, and so we do pay for it, and that costs as paying for it would imply money. So if you would like to help us do that, you can donate. tvlr.fm/donate. You can also buy our merch at tvlr.fm/store or become a patron at patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report. If you're a member of a union, then please do think about getting your local or international to sponsor the show. We absolutely could not do it without our union sponsors. It's very important to the sustainability of this program.
Let me add a disclaimer that any viewpoints or opinions expressed in this program today belong solely to their author and do not necessarily represent any organization or sponsor. We welcome all of our listeners, whether you are on YouTube, Facebook, Unclaimed Mysteries Radio, WVNN, WZZA, WHIV, or through your favorite podcast app. We are proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network and encourage our listeners to check it out.
Absolutely. So let's talk about this first thing that we mentioned in the headlines, and that is this win for transparency in the economic incentives, the way that we roll them out here in Alabama. If you are a regular listener to the show, you will know that the economic incentives in Alabama are virtually completely opaque. I mean, there is nothing that you can get out of the Department of Commerce here in Alabama, nothing you can get from the government, and of course the companies aren't going to come out with this on their own, right? So it's very obscure. You know, we have no idea what strings are attached to the money, whether or not the conditions are being met. You know, sometimes municipalities and states will give economic incentives and tie it to the creation of so many jobs or something like that. We don't know what those conditions are, and we don't know if they're being met because the system is so opaque here in the state of Alabama. In fact, in 2022, the disclosure laws were so poor that the state tied with Georgia for last place in a national transparency survey of state-level economic development programs, and the score was 0 out of 100. But Adam, there is a little bit of good news coming out of the legislature as the session ended a while back, isn't there?
Right, yeah, and today's main show is going to be very Alabama-focused, so it is good to start with a little bit of good news out of Montgomery for a change. And so, as Jacob described, we have a lot of issues with economic development and the way incentives are used in this state. But following years of pressure from Jobs to Move America, their coalition partners, and good government advocates, the Alabama legislature passed a bill to create better transparency around the state's use of tax incentives. The recently enacted Transparency and Incentives Act requires the Commerce Department to disclose annually the names of subsidized companies, the estimated value of tax credits per company, the county location of the project, the estimated number of jobs that will be created, what workers will be paid, and the company investment, along with the estimated return on investment of each subsidized project. This is a major victory for those concerned about government transparency and accountability, but we still have more work to do. And I want to point folks to Patricia Todd's op-ed in AO.com, AO Political Reporter, as well as the one she co-wrote on Alabama Reflector. I want to highlight those in particular. So Alabama has awarded over $5 billion to corporations to set up shop in the state, and that includes Amazon, Hyundai, Honda, Mercedes, and others. It's important to remember that these incentives are provided with tax dollars, but that the public has not had access to the company's names, incentive amount, type of incentive, and hourly wages. Many of the jobs created do not pay a living wage and are not considered quality jobs. Manufacturers who received incentives are having a hard time finding enough workers to fill the open positions. And of course, a Hyundai supplier that they own was recently found guilty of using immigrant child labor. These are not the only ways companies benefit from subsidies. They also get sales and use tax exemptions, property tax exemptions, free, to them at least, infrastructure, workforce development training, and more. Most of the incentives impact the education budget and reduce the funds available to improve public education in Alabama. And that's obviously critical because, according to most rankings, Alabama ranks among the lowest in the country in terms of math and reading proficiency and overall academic achievement. In fact, the U.S. News and World Report ranks Alabama as 44th in the country in education. Now, I don't put a lot of stock into some of those measurements, but I think there's a little dispute that Alabama's education system certainly needs more investment, not less.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do want to just say again that we really appreciate Patricia Todd pulling this information, all this information together for some of these op-eds that she's been writing. That's where we're getting this information. And of course, some amount of verification went into, that it's true on our end. But she was the original compiler of a lot of this information. And from another one of these op-eds that she wrote in the Alabama Reflector, which is a new reporting project by the State Newsrooms organization.
Right. Yeah.
She said, she made note that, a lot more does still need to be done. We've got all of these that Adam laid out, all of these requirements for transparency, but they only include job protections, not actual jobs created or actual wages paid. Not to mention, there is no mention of how subsidized companies are going to be held accountable for the promises they make. So we've still got this issue of, okay, we have these requirements, but how are we going to make sure that the companies are doing them? That's not addressed in this new transparency package. The law only applies to completed deals and does not clarify how companies were chosen to receive subsidies. So there's no transparency into the bidding process. There's no way for us as citizens to know if there was some backroom dealing and whether or not the bids were open and competitive. And so it is still, that's why I said, that's why I opened it with, this is kind of it's a small win. It's better than nothing, right? Than having 0 out of 100. I mean, presumably when those rankings come out about Alabama's transparency next year, we'll maybe have, 20 or 30 out of 100, hope, something like that. So it's still too early to say how good it's going to be, and if it will be easy to find and understand for the average Alabamian. And also, like I mentioned, this is not retroactive. So that $5 billion that that Adam mentioned earlier, we still are not going to know anything about that. That's $5 billion from citizens of Alabama, from the working people in this state that have gone to multi-billion-dollar international corporations that we've got no idea what the agreement was, how it's being enforced, how it was bid, any of this stuff. We don't know, and under this law, we still won't know. So Jobs to Move America is encouraging the legislature to, in the upcoming sessions, create a separate budget for incentives so that legislators and the public can see how much is being spent and the actual return on investment. Require companies that are found guilty of violations of labor or environmental laws to refund some or all of the subsidy money that it received. It's known as a clawback in states where, they don't just give away money for free to these corporations. Jobs to Move America is also pushing for requirements that incentivizes the creation of quality jobs with a minimum living wage, requirements that companies receiving these incentives negotiate a community benefits agreement with local coalitions to ensure that the community has a voice in these incentive packages, and the banning of non-disclosure agreements between companies and public officials that keep the terms of these incentive packages hidden from the public. Other states in the South have already been disclosing subsidy data for some time, like North Carolina, South Carolina, Louisiana, and Tennessee. So this is absolutely something that we need to be doing. And Jobs to Move America and us, we don't necessarily dispute that tax incentives can be used to recruit a business to set up shop in the state as a way to boost the economy. And in fact, I think that public investment is very good. And I think that it can spur a lot of private investment as well as being good on its own terms. There was a really great article in the Prospect last week about how baked into our laws about how we evaluate public investment is what's known as crowding out. And it's this theory that says, okay, well, when the public invests, when government invests in something, it is only 50% as effective as a private investment, and it dissuades private investment in the sector that the public is investing in. And that is just such a silly thing to think intuitively, but also with this CHIPS Act and the IRA, all of this, it's really disproving that in a real, in real actual life, because in addition to these public investments in manufacturing and semiconductor production, there is more private investment than ever before in these industries. So it's really important that, that we recognize the value of public investment, but it's also important that we, not all public investment is created the same, right? And it's important that we be smart about it and that we hold the people who receive it accountable to us as a government and as a state. So
absolutely. I mean, transparency is so important there,
Yep.
and knowing about the wages and benefits that are offered, and knowing exactly what the state is doing, and knowing their compliance with policy and law. that is huge. And I think having transparency should be the first step in any sort of economic development, or certainly any kind of incentive package. So yeah, really, really appreciate Patricia Todd and Jobs to Move America for all their work on that front, because politicians love to tout economic development. But this kind of transparency is a necessary first step. I totally agree with the additional recommendations. I think, there's a lot more to be done, obviously. And in particular, I really think community benefits agreements, when done right, can be transformative. And so I really applaud the work Jobs to Move America is doing with those right here in Alabama.
And I want to answer Todd in the chat, who asked, how does the Freedom of Information Act play into this? Is Alabama exempt from that? And the short answer is basically yes. The Freedom of Information Act applies to the federal government, and then each state has their own version of it. And Alabama's public records access laws are basically non-existent. There is no even requirement that the government entity acknowledge receipt.
Right. Yeah.
They don't even have to acknowledge that they received a public records access request, much less give it to people, much less give it to people in a timely fashion, much less give it to people in a timely fashion for an affordable price. It also costs money sometimes to get these public records. And so, our freedom of information is just absolutely terrible.
We do have the Alabama Open Records Act, but it is incredibly weak and not particularly useful. And as for the specifics of some of the specific information with economic incentives and whether it's even subject to the Open Records Act, I really can't tell you. And so that's why I think, putting some of this in black and white in legislation is pretty important.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a caller, so let's bring that caller on the line really quick, and we will see what they have to say. We'll go to a break, and then we'll talk to Michael Bailey about air quality. But first, let's talk to this caller from a 510 area code.
All right. 510.
Hey, y'all.
What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, this is Kat calling in from the Bay Area. I'm a UPS Teamster.
Kat from the Bay Area. You said you're a Teamster?
That's right.
Awesome. And you work for UPS, I guess, presumably?
Yeah, I work at the airport.
What's on your mind, Kat?
In light of all the media attention that's been going around the UPS negotiations and the issues with part-time wages and whatnot, I also wanted to raise an issue that I feel hasn't gotten quite as much media attention, which is around the market rate adjustments.
We're actually going to be talking about that in the second half of the show in overtime. Sean O'Brien, the general president of the Teamsters, he made a really good point when he was asked on Bloomberg about, the host credulously kind of recited what UPS said to them, and said, and he was like, "Well, UPS is telling us that part-timers are making $20 an hour," and Sean O'Brien said, "Well, in some markets, they are doing these market rate adjustments to bring new employees in at $20 an hour. That's correct. But we still have some part-timers who have been there long before that who are stuck at $16.50.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I mean, essentially the way that I see it is that in areas that have a much higher cost of living, like the Bay Area, obviously like the coastal cities, that UPS can kind of manipulate the wages however they see fit to bring in workers where and when they need them. And then when that workforce is no longer required, they just cut back the wages. You get as much as half of the workforce at any given location just quits. And those who remain are stuck with significantly less income than what they had before, and sometimes less hours and whatnot.
Yeah, absolutely. And it sounds like the negotiating committee is targeting that.
Yeah, and I think that we as part-timers, especially in these locations, really need to get that message out there, because there's a lot of focus on like the $25 an hour. And I think that's great. I think that's the floor, not the ceiling, honestly. Yeah. But for some places, honestly, 25 is not even enough to like get the average worker in the door or excited about going on strike, because that's maybe like $1 or $2 more than what they're already making, and it's like barely enough to scrape by. Living in the Bay Area where it costs like $2,000 for a 1-bedroom apartment. So if you're making already like low 20s per hour, you need 2-3 jobs, no question.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's another thing that UPS is going out about, and they're always quoting the full-time pay, which is not even representative. The full-time driver pay is not even representative of the majority of the UPS workforce. The majority of the UPS workforce are part-timers,
right?
Which is not something that they ever say. But even with the full-time driver salary, they're saying, oh, it's $93,000 a year. And Sean O'Brien mentioned in this clip that we're going to be playing later that that's true, but to get that $93,000, you got to work 60, 70 hours a week of mandated overtime, right? So there's just a lot of ways that UPS is really fudging the numbers to try to get the public on their side, and I certainly appreciate Sean O'Brien and folks like you, talking in your communities and making sure that folks actually know what's going on with UPS, and then comparing what y'all are making to the billions of dollars in profit that UPS has made just in the last year. So I appreciate the call, Kat.
Yeah, and just to be specific, I think like the clear demand here is like if they give us those market rate adjustments, they can't take them back. They can't cut them. They have to give us whatever contractual raises and whatever cost of living adjustments are already in the contract on top of that. Because right now, if there's contractual raises, but they're already paying you more than the base wage in the contract, you don't get a raise. So there's people where I work who haven't seen raises for multiple years in a row for that reason.
Yeah.
So just trying to elevate that. And then also, tying it back in with the general point of why is cost of living so high to begin with? It's because the landlords are treating real estate as a speculation in these big cities. And we have to see that there's multiple different ways that people in the corporate power and the ruling class are pressing people, making it impossible to live.
Right.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Right.
Appreciate the call, Kat, and keep us updated, and best of luck in these contract negotiations.
Thanks for the show, y'all.
Yep.
Appreciate you.
Bye.
With that, we're going to go ahead and go to a break. On the other side, we're going to be talking to Michael Bailey about air quality, which is something that is important and had been for a small amount of time during the pandemic, something that people were really kind of interested in. And it's fallen by the wayside amid the quote unquote end of the pandemic as it leaves the front of people's minds. But it is still, COVID is still here, and there are still people getting it, and there are still people dying from it at higher rates than we ever died from the flu. And so I wouldn't argue that we should shut down everything again, but there are ways that we can make normal life safer for non-immunocompromised people, but in particular for immunocompromised people, for people that are more at risk. And there are a lot of things that we can do that would not affect the quality of our lives, that we wouldn't even really notice, except for the fact that we would get sick less. So we're going to talk to Michael Bailey about that on the other side of the break. Stay tuned. You're listening to the Valley Labor Report.
IBW 558 is like a great football team. You've got to have the aptitude, skills, and knowledge to outperform the competition. If you're a non-union electrician, now is the perfect time to get off the sideline and join our team. We have the absolute best wages and benefit package in North Alabama and Southern Tennessee. It's because our team stands together, bargains together, and our families benefit from it. With immediate openings, you have the opportunity to see why the IBW is the right choice.
Support for the Valley Labor Report comes from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Union. Learn more by visiting www.ifpte.org.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for this program comes from the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 136, out of Central Alabama. Learn more at ibew136.org.
Attention union members, membership organizations, podcasters, or anyone with a payment processing need. The future is here, and your organization needs to be prepared by working with Unionly. With Unionly, your union or organization can take payments on a mobile device, eliminating processing fees, giving you a better price than other payment processing methods, while at the same time supporting a union-friendly business with a specialized skill set to meet your needs. Your members will thank you when they pay their dues at their convenience without waiting in line to deposit cash or check. Start preparing for the future today by calling 206-595-8631 or visiting unionly.io.
Are you looking for a better future, a career that can have you set for life, and to be a part of something that's bigger than yourself? If you are, then consider a skilled trades apprenticeship with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. The work of IUPAT is all around us, from the industrial painters who work on the bridges to drywall finishers, floor coverers, the glazers who install the glass in our skylines, and so much more. With an IUPAT apprenticeship, you earn while you learn and receive benefits while learning the trade, including a pension. We provide world-class education free of charge. That's right, no student debt. Our starting salaries for apprentices that graduate is above the national median salary with benefits for entire families. And you have the flexibility to take your trade wherever you'd like in the country to work. IUPAT District Council 77 covers our entire region, so give Adam Booth a call at 205-603-3142 for more information. Again, that phone number is 205-603-3142. Come build a better future with us today and join IUPAT.
The sign hit the city like a bolt of lightning.
You know the photo. It's iconic. Marches in the streets holding a simple sign with a simple message.
I am a man.
The I Am Story podcast explores the fight that inspired those words, how a group of sanitation workers in Memphis stood up and made history.
They don't see us as men and women.
Go to iamstory.com or wherever you get your podcasts to subscribe.
I'm attorney Tommy Sinyard. When you've been injured and need help, you need a lawyer who's with you.
Sinyard Law. You need attorneys always available to take care of you. Sinyard Law.
And keep you in the loop. It's your case. You need to know what's happening.
Sinyard Law. And never a charge to meet with us to evaluate your case. Sinyard Law.
A new firm, but an old name. One that will stay with you every step of the way.
Sinyard Law. The name with proven results.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Labor creates all wealth should go to labor, and you are listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, my co-host is Adam Keller, and we have a phone number and the line is open. If you want to get where Kat was before the break, you can give us a call at 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. And so let's talk to Michael Bailey now. Michael Bailey is a local parent here in Huntsville and co-founder of Indoor Air Care Advocates. He's a friend of the show, recurring guest now, talking about an issue that should resonate with all of us regardless of affiliation, of our politics, of what we think about unions, anything like that. And that is the way the indoor air quality impacts our working conditions, our students' learning conditions, and the ways that government and employers can take effective action for our health and safety. He's been really active in pushing local school systems to make the much-needed improvements in this area, and we certainly appreciate his work. Michael, welcome back to the Valley Labor Report.
Thanks so much for the intro. And first things first, I think it's really cool that you mentioned immunocompromised people, people with comorbidities, and those are real people in our community. I know some. They're not like rare or anything like that. And it's really a compassionate and courageous and important act to make sure we don't leave such people behind. These are our community members. So I wanted to thank you for that. But I also, I want people to know that there are normal people. Well, shucks, that is really a faux pas. But there are people who, a lot of people consider themselves normal if they don't have a comorbidity or an immunocompromised thing. I'm trying to think from the point of view of people who don't experience those parts of life. And so they think of themselves as normal. And so there are normal people who didn't have any, comorbidity fairy come tell them that they've got issues that end up experiencing problems. And there are furthermore normal people, right? People who consider themselves not to have any of these problems, and so they think it's not an issue, who are experiencing problems because of the fact that we are getting sick more often. And it's not just COVID, it actually is the flu. It's also RSV and things like that. And the reason I have anything to say about it at all is because I know there to be solutions. It's clear that we don't have to, quote, live in fear by shutting things down. We can really do something to make it easier for all of us to live productive, happy, long lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so let's start with talking about chronic absenteeism. Absenteeism in relation to our students in public schools.
Yeah, for sure. So most schools, including Madison schools, and I count Madison City and Madison County in that, didn't really do much with ventilation after 2020. We just kind of went back to masks optional, and we embraced normalcy. And the ALSDE report card said that Madison City schools' chronic absenteeism in 2021 was less than 3%, which sounds really dreamy. And after the U.S. Department of Education withdrew their COVID-19 reporting waiver, where do you think that chronic absenteeism went? I'll give you a guess. Yeah.
Let's see.
It went this way. Yeah. It doubled in Alabama. And in Madison City schools, it increased by a factor of 2.6. And I informed Dr. Nichols and Madison City Schools Board of Education in June that the measurements that we have show that their schools aren't bringing in even 1/7 of the outdoor air that's supposed to be brought in according to mechanical code. And I explained how that would make kids sick. And he said that, well, if you don't count the period between August and January, which is ridiculous, then, our attendance is 95 and 96%. But I know there to be parents that have been complaining since January and February that their kids are still sick. I know that there was a pylon in a mom's group of like 40 parents that said that their kids were, and I quote, missing so much school, it's insane. And so there's also chronic absenteeism that I think is maybe swallowing up some component of that lack of attendance. I also know a mom whose kid was sick 19 or more days in the school year, and Madison City Schools called her to ask her how they could support her in getting her kid to school more often. And I thought that was really adding insult to injury, because I've been trying to tell them what they ought to do that. Parents need to tell schools, fix your shoddy ventilation and quit costing me in sick time. So yeah. There's also, I really ought to mention this, there's a dad who spoke at Madison City Schools Board of Education meeting, which was captured by I Vote Madison, which in full disclosure, my wife co-runs I Vote Madison. And they recorded a Madison City School Board meeting on the 6th of June where a dad said that he and his 5 kids are sick so often, and several other families, same thing, that they've all gotten together with an attorney because of the undue burden of doctor's notes, not to be able to keep their kids home like they should. And that guy, whether he knows it or not, is advocating for air quality because of what I'll share with you next. But essentially, they're all experiencing that heightened illness, and they're routinely sending their kids to school sick. And the kids are carrying the weight of the school that didn't do anything with ventilation and still isn't meeting code. And by the way, if anybody knows that person, please contact Indoor Air Care Advocates. It's indooraircareadvocates@gmail.com. We would really like to connect with that father.
So yeah, tell us what you've learned about Madison City schools in particular, but also in general about your research with local school districts and air quality and like who's up to code basically.
Absolutely. So we learned that Madison City Schools thought they could use a technology called ionization to stand in for some amount of ventilation in some schools. Do you know what ionization is?
No, not really. I've heard of it, but I have no clue what that is.
Neither did I. I was following all these experts and they're like, you should ventilate, you should filter. And I had never seen one say, you should ionize. So we looked into it. And the way it's supposed to work is that ions are pushed into the breathing zone. And in that breathing zone ventilation, those ions are supposedly going to increase the particle mass and drag those particles to the ground or make them stick to the wall through a process that those vendors call agglomeration. But the EPA and Boeing, even right here in Huntsville Labs, concluded that that doesn't contribute significantly to disinfection or pulling particles out of the air. And even the disclaimer on the website for one of those vendors expressly says it's not intended to prevent infections. And furthermore, there are chemists at UC Boulder and elsewhere who say if you add ions to indoor air, the things that already are in indoor air, like paint fumes and carpeting fibers and other things, can partially decompose and add unanticipated byproducts to the air. So it's kind of like a little science experiment. And that's why I think that the Bloomberg School of Public Health really put it best when they said the primary aim for air quality improvement should remain removing contaminants from the air and not introducing new substances to the air. And I firmly believe that. So because they're using ionization, what proportion of outdoor air would you guess that they're cutting out and not giving to students?
At this point now, I'm starting to think none.
It's actually, you're onto something almost. The school wouldn't give us any numbers for how much outdoor air they are giving to students, and it's maybe because they don't have the tools to measure it. I'm not really sure. But we took matters into our own hands, literally. We gave some carbon dioxide monitors, like this device that I'm showing you, to occupants who go to those schools, not specifying what kind of occupants, just to keep it vague here. But we sent these monitors to Columbia Elementary, James Clemens High, and Mill Creek Elementary, and we confirmed that 2 out of those 3 had CO2 accumulation that climbed past 2 or 3 times the amount that you'd expect to see in a school that meets code. And that's based on a figure from the Division of Construction Management. They said, if you're meeting code, the number on this little screen ought not exceed 1,200 generally. Just, I'm paraphrasing, that's a rule of thumb, but that's roughly what it shouldn't exceed. And in one school, the number was as high as 3,700. Now, CO2 isn't going to hurt anybody necessarily at those levels. That's not the thing we're worried about. What it means, though, is that the air that students are exhaling, they're making stale air. They're consuming the fresh air and exhaling, and there's nothing replacing it with clean air. And so whereas in a room that meets code, you could expect to breathe only about 1% to 2% air that comes from other people's lungs, which is kind of yuck, but only 1% to 2%, so that's good. But if you're not meeting code like Columbia Elementary, where it was 3,700 parts per million and climbing, then you're breathing more than 9% of every breath from other people's lungs. And I firmly doubt that anybody on the Board of Education would volunteer to huff directly out of the breathing zone air coming out of students' mouths and just go ahead and get sick. So if we're wondering how sickness can happen, it's not like you need a public health degree. It's like if you're not adding fresh air and you're letting stale air accumulate and the kids are sitting together in a hot box, they're going to get more sick very likely.
Right, yeah. And so the thing about it is, like, they can actually take action against this, right? I mean, there are things that can be done to prevent illness in this way and to recirculate air, or to have fresh air, basically, and to improve the indoor air quality that ultimately translates into less sickness, healthier people, less absence for kids, less absence for employees, like, right? There's stuff that can be done.
Exactly. Yeah, it really is. In the end, it's hitting everyone's pocketbooks. It's hitting your PTO balance when you have to take off work to take the kid to the doctor. If it does get to that point, you're sometimes taking off work because the kid just isn't sick enough to go to the doctor, but they need to stay home. And so you're at home with them for whatever reason. In some cases, just the child isn't attending school. That's harming academic performance. There are so many impacts to our productivity and to our academic excellence. I don't know why we would tolerate it when just meeting code would reduce that amount of rebreathed air, and that's a first step. Mechanical code, as adopted by the Division of Construction Management, says you should be giving kids at least 10 cubic feet per minute per kid of outdoor air or equivalent. And there are actually recommendations beyond that for putting kids back after the pandemic or during, really during it. CDC in 2020 said you ought to be giving about 18 or 20 CFM per person. And they define that in terms of carbon dioxide, but it's roughly 18 or 20 cubic feet per minute per person. The World Health Organization, 21 CFM per person. The Lancet said 30 CFM per person. There's a new standard from ASHRAE. I've heard a lot of schools say, well, we implement ASHRAE. And I think that they're talking about standard 62.1, which is essentially mechanical code. But there's a new standard, and that organization, by the way, said 62.1 ain't enough. And they also said, well, here's a new standard that would be enough, and it's 50 CFM per person. That's about 4 times what you require in mechanical code if you incorporate both the per person and the per unit area amount of code. So I'm getting real scientific here, but basically the recommendations are all give students way more than code. So if we're giving them way less than code, like 1/7 of code, we're doing the literal opposite of the recommendations. And I shouldn't be surprised if we find that students' chronic absenteeism figures go up, if we find that parents are consulting lawyers because of undue burden of doctor's notes, and that we find pylons in moms groups about the excessive illness. I don't think that that would be a surprise if I knew that we were doing that.
Right. And one thing is, you have approached school districts throughout North Alabama with ways to address this, including my understanding was that there was a grant run through UAB where HEPA filters were actually available for every classroom for basically any school that actually wanted them, any school that requested it. So talk to us about that.
Yeah, that's the ELC program. Basically, they used to be testing kids for COVID, and that kind of went out of style. People weren't interested in it or participating or whatever the case may be. And they said, well, we got to liquidate this money in a way that does aid public health. And they made the smart decision to say, well, we could buy portable HEPA filters, because what they knew is that portable HEPA filters can produce what's called equivalent outdoor air. And that just means it's equivalent in terms of not having contaminants in it to if you had brought in outdoor air. But you don't have to condition this air from these HEPA filters. It's just like installing a window in the middle of the room. But you can't reduce CO2 with that. Just a quick understanding, if filtration is used, it's not going to change this number, but it will clean the air. And so they gave these out to schools, first 5 at a time per school, then 15 at a time. And finally, they were just like, here, just take all the HEPA filters. Nobody's taking them. And there's one school I know of that I can't speak about the name of that school, but there's one school in Alabama that I know took 2 HEPA filters per classroom. And they're getting enough equivalent outdoor air in their classrooms on fan speed setting 2 of those HEPA filters, so that if their HVAC broke, they would still be meeting code. They would still be exceeding code if they have like a normal classroom occupancy. That's outstanding. So that means that if they are meeting code with their mechanical ventilation and they have these HEPA filters, they would be meeting some of the most aggressive recommendations we've heard of. And they just did it by doing something that was free. So Madison City Schools, I think they have them in a closet. They got maybe 15 per school. We let them know about that school that exercised the program for 2 per classroom, and Madison City Schools, as far as I can discern, did not opt in. Madison County Schools also, we can't tell that they did anything with that. It doesn't seem like they did. And their ventilation as well. I mean, I'm aware of some measurements there from faculty, and they're comparable to James Clemens, where we saw 6% rebreathed air rate. So that's about 3 times what you'd be breathing in from other people, or even 6 times as much as you'd be breathing in, depending on the size of the classroom, if you had met code. So none of it's really good, and I don't know why they're not doing these free things to just keep kids in class. It's not even like you have to keep those filters after that period of time. If those 2 years of filters run out and you didn't seem to do anything, just give them to the teachers or something.
Right. Yeah, it really does seem like a no-brainer. I mean, all of this is coming in the context of COVID, which did obviously increase risks for a lot of people. But I don't know anybody that loves getting sick. Just outside of the COVID context, I don't know anybody that loves that. And if you can reduce my chances of getting sick in the workplace, or my children getting sick at school and then bringing that home to me for free, I'm really going to be questioning why you're not doing that. What could possibly be the reason other than, laziness, maliciousness, but it's so weird to think about that there would be school administrators that are, doing their hands like this, thinking about, I can't wait to get all these parents sick. But that's the effect, right?
It is. So I know that there are concerns about having enough staff to go run around and change those filters. But I mean, nobody ever asked me if I would do it. I certainly would. I would go to all the schools and do that. And I know that I'm connected with parents who have volunteered to do similar kinds of efforts on a recurring basis. So there is not a lack of support for doing it. It's just that there's been a lack of willpower to do it, because I believe they underappreciate the connection between not giving students fresh air and then finding them getting sick. But if you didn't have a filter in a fish tank and you had a bunch of fish and they were breathing in all that yuck basically, and you didn't have any filter, they would die. So I'm not saying that that this is what's going to happen to kids, but I am saying it's common sense that if you live in an environment and you're there all the time, you need to have clean stuff to breathe. It's just kind of like common sense. So I think that parents need to call schools, and each time their kid is sick with another virus, and tell them, hey, you need to up your ventilation game and quit putting this on me and my kid. Don't tell me I need to get my kid in more often, and don't make me take time off work because of these issues. This is really on you. You had all the information. You had 3 years to do something. You had ESSER funds. You had the ELC program with free HEPA filters. You've made your decisions to spend it on learning loss in 2020, but you really need to do something now, because the learning loss that's happening right now is affecting my kids' grades in some cases.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. So what can community members do? You mentioned that, and I think that's great. I mean, to start having those conversations with the schools. But, what else can folks do if they're interested?
Yeah, one thing that they could do is come to the Madison Public Library on Wednesday, July 19th at 6:30. So just plugging for our event here, but we'll be in Auditorium 1 presenting, thank you, yeah. We'll be presenting how air quality relates to public health and kind of just basically being able to attend work and school more often and just focus and do a great job at what we do and what we love to do. So we'll educate about what parents really need to be demanding in quantifiable terms, because that's one thing parents haven't had in the toolbox mostly. What exactly should I ask for? And how do I avoid getting hand waved away? How do I ask for something quantifiable so there can be a yes or no answer as to whether it's been done? Another thing is, and it's a privilege to be able to do this, but you could buy a CO2 monitor. You also could borrow one from us, Indoor Air Care Advocates. We've lent them out to various occupants of buildings who want to understand, and this is not just in schools, but just want to understand, well, am I getting adequate ventilation in the place where I work? Or are they hotboxing me with my office mates who are sneezing? And so I don't think any of it's about being afraid of a virus. I think it's about like, why are you causing me this undue stress and burden when I really I like to do my work. I'm great at it. I want to do it and I don't want to be sick. So why are you doing this to me? So getting a CO2 monitor is a way to do that. We're also trying to establish a CO2 monitor lending program at the library. We'll update on that at a later time.
Cool.
So those are two things you can do.
Absolutely.
Michael, before you go, we did have a question from the chat about the impact of school population to the size of the school. Is there a recommended square footage per child that would be acceptable, or is it just more about filtration and flow?
I don't have great figures. I will say that the American Industrial Hygiene Association has said that if you can't give kids at least 30 square feet per kid, so, multiply 20 kids by 30 and you get a 900 square foot room, right? If you can't give them that much space, they've indicated that you should be going towards about 12 air changes per hour rather than 6 air changes per hour. So there are recommendations I'm aware of that have that 30 square feet as a metric for going toward the higher end of ventilation recommendations. But I'm not an education expert per se, right? I'm just a dad who doesn't understand why we're not doing this. So I don't know what the proper amount of square footage is per kid. I do know that once you have adequate ventilation, if children are spaced out adequately, if the teacher to student ratio is okay and the room is big enough, then distancing, like we used to kind of pursue foolishly without ventilation, distancing actually does begin to matter, because the air that someone breathes out has a chance of getting sucked up or filtered or ventilated out instead of going into the next kid and getting them sick and maximizing illness. So certainly being farther apart does make a difference, but only when you've got ventilation. If you don't, that stuff is just going to cloud up and fill up in the room, and it doesn't matter that you had the kids far apart. So that's why I personally think it was foolish to pursue distancing without first making sure we had done something about ventilation and had the appropriate amount of fresh air coming in.
I see. That's and in case you still weren't convinced by all the benefits that he's been talking about having all this improved air quality, Infinite Content in the chat says, if the air quality is better and more oxygen is in the air, students will be more focused. Casinos pump in oxygen to keep gamblers more awake and alert all the time. I didn't know
True
that,
facts.
but
True
there
facts.
we go. That's
William J. Fisk is I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I just, that's interesting. And yeah, I appreciate that, Infinite Content.
William J. Fisk is a Lawrence Berkeley scholar or academic rather, who published a review of many, many, many kinds of literature, and they all said the same thing. As you give kids more ventilation and fresh air, their cognitive performance and even their grade point averages and test scores increase. And so there's no downside to free fresh air. So we're just hoping that the schools that have still got ESSER money that they've failed to be able to allocate to the things they thought they would might be able to change course. The ARPA Act actually sets forth that you must update your plan every 6 months, and you are free to update it in light of any facts that you come into contact with that may change your course. And so all schools have an option, if they have yet to spend those committed funds, have an option to rebudget that and spend it on something that's going to make a difference in terms of the current learning loss that they're experiencing. I just think that it's difficult to get them to believe that there's a connection or that there is a problem, even though parents are seeming to complain about it. So that's more parents need to get together and acknowledge the problem and know that there are solutions. We don't have to just complain. We really have something we should have expected.
Right. Last thing, Michael, remind us about your article that was published in Salon recently.
Yeah, I co-authored this with a co-founder of Protect Their Future. And we just wrote about how, I mean, there are so many air quality scientists and aerosol scientists and HVAC engineers and professionals, industrial hygienists, et cetera, who are saying, hey, this is a thing. You can actually enjoy that normalcy that we were kind of guaranteed and promised
And
by
I should
just doing these
add,
things.
the nurses' unions, in particular in the UK, have also been very vocal on this issue.
Yeah, unions in the UK have actually put together ventilation guides. And so I think they're really on top of understanding like what their working conditions ought to be if they're expected to be at work and attending and all that stuff. So I certainly think it would be valuable, kind of tying into your show, right? For unions to understand kind of the new currency at the cash register of health, of public health, and that new currency is equivalent outdoor air. And we stand ready to really tell anybody who is interested. I mean, we have spoken to homeless shelters, we have spoken to people who work in government buildings. It's just anybody who wants to understand the connection between public health and outdoor air and the science and recommendations. We would absolutely love to share with you what we've put together, which is all based on what the experts are putting forth. And we think that helps people understand what they should be expecting, demanding, asking for, etc.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Michael.
Yeah, really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. Have a good one.
Awesome. Take care. You too. Bye.
Adam, looks like we got another caller in the queue, so
all right,
let's bring them on the air to
Sure.
see what they've got to say. Really appreciated that conversation with Michael.
Yeah, and before we bring the caller on the air, I'm going to take just a moment of personal privilege to say that I actually contacted Limestone County Schools as a parent. I learned this information from Mike and the organizing that his group is doing, and so I'm not an expert by any means, and certainly don't know as much about it as Michael does. But when I heard free filters per every classroom, I thought, well, hell, my daughter deserves one, and so does every other kid.
Yeah.
And so I made the ask and got nowhere fast. And like you, Jacob, I'm like, wait a second, I'm trying to help you help them, and I'm telling you it doesn't cost money. Like, probably just need an email here, a signature there. Come on now.
Yeah.
So that is often the frustration that we experience as activists and as organizers out here trying to force any kind of positive change in our community. And it's just it's a matter of persistence and education and continued agitation. So appreciate Michael and all the work he's doing.
Yeah.
On that note, let me bring our caller on the air from 701, I believe.
701 area code. What's your name and where are you calling from?
Tyler, and I'm calling from 701 is from North Dakota.
Tyler from North Dakota. What's on your mind?
I'm just a Teamster, and I've been listening to your show for like the last 4 days. I've been just binging at you guys on YouTube, and I just appreciate what you guys are doing, bringing light to the contract talk and everything that Sean O'Brien's doing. You guys are doing a fantastic job. I was just curious, are you guys Teamsters, any one of you?
Tyler, appreciate the call and appreciate the compliments. We are not Teamsters. We are union members here in the state of Alabama. I'm a member and a steward of AFGE, Local 1858, the American Federation of Government Employees. And Adam is a member and trustee of the Stagehands Union, IATSE, Local 900 in the area. And so we do this on the side because we care about working folks, unions, educating people about what they can do to make their lives better. And we feel like this contract fight with the Teamsters and UPS is a really good educational opportunity for so many Americans across the country to see what the power of collective organization can do for you and your family. And I even though UPS is going out with these numbers about full-time drivers make $93,000 a year. And we talked about how that's, there's a little bit more context there. They have to work 60, 70 hours a week to get $93,000. But even that, it doesn't bother me that number gets out there, because that still tells people, look at what unionization has brought these people. And look at what it can bring you if you and your coworkers do it. So
it's a real whose side are you on kind of moment.
Yeah.
And so we love and appreciate our Teamster brothers and sisters, and and are cheering y'all on absolutely all the way. And just encourage y'all to keep up the fight and continue organizing and continue having these conversations amongst each other and in the community. And I think the community is going to continue to rally behind y'all. At least that's what I believe. I think the public is behind the UPS drivers, the Teamsters, and so I really appreciate you calling in and appreciate your membership.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I've been with UPS since 2010. Fresh out of high school, 20 years old. I'm going on year 13 now. A little 6, sorry, so if you can't understand me. So no, it's good that this contract is finally O'Brien is doing something. Also didn't do a very good one on the 2018 one. It just completely was a mess, and I think that if we dig our heels in and we get what we need to get and bump up our money, because when I first started in 2010, I was making $8.50 an hour working the night shift from 10 o'clock at night until 3 in the morning, and of course, $130 check every week is not going to cut it by any means. So I did have another job in the morning and worked all day, and that's just no way to be. But that's what it's been since then. So I just think that there needs to be a lot of changes with wages and whatnot, and maybe even I was even thinking, like, because they have the health insurance, that's their big ploy. Come here and work.
Mm-hmm.
Get the health insurance. Got the best health insurance, that we fought for and we got. And that's true. We have really good health insurance. Maybe like bump somebody's wages up if they don't want to get the health insurance, just do something where it can bring some bodies in the building, because we are just lacking bodies. And us part-timers are working excruciating hours. Sometimes we're going in at 8 right now, and we're getting out at 3 in the morning. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, that's wild. You said that you've been working there since 2010, 13-year Teamster, and you started at $8.50. And of course, we know that $8.50 went a little bit further 13 years ago than it does now, but it didn't go that much further. It was still only $1 above the minimum wage, because the last time the minimum wage was raised was in 2009, where it got put up to $7.25. So, you're talking about not making that much more than minimum wage, even back in 2010. And so, those numbers are still important, even amid some of the UPS workers making a decent wage. There are still a lot of part-timers that are making, like you did, near minimum wage. Would you, and you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but would you care to tell us what you're making now as presumably, Are you still a part-timer?
I still am a part-timer, and I am now at $20.50 an hour after 13 years. So, and the people are hiring at $17 an hour, $16 an hour. Yeah. And when they had the pay raise during the COVID, they bumped it up to 19 to get people in there because we were so heavy. We're processing 30,000 packages a day in our building, and they bumped it up to $19 an hour. And then all of a sudden, after that year, they came out and they said, "You guys are all going back to $16, $50, $17 an hour. You guys are losing that extra $2 an hour." But you bring those people in at $17 an hour, and they just started, and I'm over at $20 an hour. You're right where I'm at.
Right.
And it's like, whoa.
Yep. Yeah.
I'm better off taking a couple of years. I'm better taking a couple of years off, getting my family together, and coming back and making the same amount of money.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, no joke. It's companies are so loath to actually give you respect for loyalty and for giving them, I mean, really the best years of your life. And the idea that they don't respect that is really gross, and that's why we have to make them respect it, right? And that's why this contract fight is so important. Are you a part-timer by choice at this point, or would?
Yeah. So my dad owned the business, and I worked for him. And he recently passed away in 2020, so I just kind of been doing that sprinkler gig with my own. But I just wanted to be a part timer and make a little extra money in the winter when I was off. And it just turned into kind of just stuck, and I just kind of been doing it. I just kind of go off a couple hours sleep here, a couple hours sleep. And then I had a child, and I had another child. I got married, and it's like I need the health insurance. So go in for 4 hours a night and do what I got to do. Make a little extra money every week wouldn't hurt.
Yeah. All right, Tyler from North Dakota.
But I never want to get into the driving because I know how much they drive. So crazy. So. The money for $93,000 a year is really work for those guys.
Yeah, they definitely work for it. That's for sure.
All right, guys. I appreciate you guys.
All right, appreciate it. Tyler from North Dakota. Thanks for the call. If you want to get where Tyler was, you can give us a call at 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. The phone lines are open. You can also send us a text message if you don't want to call at the same number. We're going to go ahead and take a break really quick, and we're going to be right back with some more Alabama news. Don't go anywhere.
There's a lot of talk about a shortage of workers, but that's not the case with IBW 558. We have provided our customers over 3,000 workers and performed over 3 million man-hours in a pandemic year. With 8,000 OJT hours, 900 classroom hours, OSHA 30, and a state license, our members receive the equivalent of a master's degree. That's what makes IBW 558 the right choice for your electrical needs. Look us up at Facebook or at IBW558.org.
Support for this program is provided by the International Association for Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local Lodge 44 in Decatur, Alabama. Learn more at iamaw44.org.
Support for this program also comes from the Iron Workers, Local 477. So if you are looking for contractors with lower than average EMR and TRIR, they tell me that if you need to know what those mean, then you will. Or if you need to supplement a workforce at any level for any amount of time, short or long term, if you need iron workers that come trained and certified at no extra cost, or if you need workers from superintendent down to general laborer, and you're looking to start work on a project, or you're unhappy with your current contractor situation, you need to call my friend Jeb Miles with the Ironworkers Local 477. They only work with the best in the business, vetted contractors, and can do all kinds of jobs from roofing to steel and bridge erection, from welding to heavy rigging, from structural repairs to machinery alignment, and much more. They supply manpower on 4 of the 5 largest projects in North Alabama, so you know they're legit. If you need good quality, safe, efficient, diligent, and knowledgeable workers on your job, then you need the Ironworkers Local 477. Call Jeb Miles at 256-383-3334 or via email at local477@bellsouth.net, and make sure you tell them that you heard about them on the Valley Labor Report.
We're the nurses, firefighters, and claims representatives that help keep our government services running. We respond to natural disasters. We care for our nation's veterans, and we investigate discrimination in the workplace. We are federal and D.C. government workers, and we are proud to serve the American people. Working in more than 70 agencies across the government, we know we can fulfill our mission because our union has our back. Learn more at afge.org. Paid for by the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO.
The Laborers International Union of North America, Local 366, is proudly recruiting North Alabama workers to work construction and nuclear plant maintenance. If you're interested, please contact Donna at their training center to start the process. That phone number is 256-415-7452. Again, that phone number is 256-415-7452. No experience is needed. Free training is offered, but you must be able to pass a background check and a drug test. Local hiring that grows our community with good-paying jobs that have benefits is their mission. Live better, work union, Local 366, feel the power.
Support for this program also comes from the Mid-South Council of Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union. Learn more at rwdsu.info.
I'm attorney Tommy Sinyard. When you've been injured and need help, you need a lawyer who's with you.
Sinyard Law. You need attorneys always available to take care of you. Sinyard Law.
And keep you in the loop. It's your case. You need to know what's happening.
Sinyard Law. And never a charge to meet with us to evaluate your case. Sinyard Law.
A new firm, but an old name. One that will stay with you every step of the way.
Sinyard Law. The name with proven results.
Do you work in an auto manufacturing plant? Are you tired of taking pride in your work without getting the respect you deserve? Consider joining the fight to unionize. Auto workers across the industry are coming together because with a union, we can negotiate for the pay, benefits, and security that we deserve and can help sustain our families. In union plants, workers bargain for long-term wage increases, competitive bonuses, and more affordable benefits. You can join the growing wave of organizing today. Find out more and contact us at Uniting Auto Workers on Facebook or contact UAW Region 8 in Lebanon, Tennessee by going to www.uawregion8.net. That's www.uawregion8.net. A better future is ours.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Alabama's only union talk radio show. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. Like I said earlier, if you've got anything to add, you can give us a call or send us a text. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR.
That's right, folks. And for those of you who don't know, we air live on WVNN, the right-wing talk radio station here in Huntsville, Athens listening area, every Saturday from 9:30 a.m. to 11 a.m. And we have our overtime section, which airs at 11 o'clock immediately after the main show ends. It's online only on Facebook and YouTube, and of course, podcast later. We actually got our start on WVNN, which is the birthplace of Sean Hannity, of all people, and home to all sorts of reactionary propaganda that we personally find highly objectionable. But we think it's important to get a different perspective out there to multiple audiences. We're happy that a portion of the show is replayed during the week on WZZA, the historic black radio station in Northwest Alabama, and on WHIV, a community radio station in New Orleans. We release the full episode on Spotify, Apple, and the various podcasting apps. So please subscribe to us on your app of choice and give us a good review. And throughout the week, clips of the show are released as standalone videos on YouTube and in some cases TikTok. So if there's a specific segment or interview you want to find, we do try to make it easy for you. Just do us a favor and hit subscribe and like. All of our content is completely free. So special thanks to all of you who donate, all of you who comment and call in. Appreciate all these Teamsters that are calling in this morning. Really love that. And thanks to all of you who've liked us, shared us, and reviewed us. That engagement on social media and the podcasting apps really does help. And it's a quick, easy, and free way to support the program. If you believe it's important to have our own media of, by, and for the Southern working class, please consider supporting us however you can, and please share with your coworkers, friends, family, and neighbors. We know there's a lot of good causes you can support, and our listeners are working folks with limited incomes. So if you do find value in our project and you're willing to chip in a couple bucks, it would really mean a lot. We've got some great stuff planned as we grow the project, and we can't do that without you. So really appreciate everyone tuning in this morning and every morning. And appreciate the calls and questions and comments we've had already this morning. And I did just want to remind folks that, Jacob and I are union members. We are not members of the Teamsters, but we are certainly supporters of the Teamsters effort. I myself am a stagehand with IATSE 900. I serve as political coordinator and a trustee in that in the union. And prior to that, I served as a high school history teacher and was very involved in the association and served as a field staffer for the NEA affiliate here in Alabama, and represented about 1,500 workers in Huntsville City Schools for over 5 years. Was very involved in my staff union during that time, which is an affiliate of NSO, the National Staff Organization. And of course, I'm a dual carder, also a member of the IWW. Got my red card, and I'm proud to be a member of IWW as well. So that's a little bit about my background, and really appreciate Jacob, and I'm proud of his involvement. He jumped right into the movement at an early age, and has been involved with AFGE and North Alabama Labor Council, helped get that going again. So that's what we do. We are trying to build power for the Southern working class, particularly here in North Alabama. That's what we're about, and that's what this show is about, and we appreciate everybody who agrees and tries to support the effort.
Yep. Thanks for that, Adam. Before we get into another segment, here's a public service announcement. Stamps are going up from 63 to 66 cents on Sunday. So if
Sunday as in tomorrow?
Oh, tomorrow's Sunday. Yeah. So if you're listening to
I
this,
better go order some stamps for the show after this. Yeah.
I ordered $150 of stamps last week.
Yeah.
So,
we need more of our Pete Seeger stamps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I ordered $150 of Pete Seeger stamps. So this isn't going to help you if you listen to this show as a podcast. So, that's a little bit of punishment for not listening to us live, I guess.
You snooze, you lose.
Yeah, you snooze, you lose. But if you're listening to us live and you mail stuff with any amount of regularity, you should stock up on stamps before they go up tomorrow. I know that I did, and sounds like Adam will before the day ends today.
That's right.
Yeah, so let's talk about this. Bosses have been fined for killing an Alabama worker. Earlier, it was the 5th of July, so just a couple of days ago. And this is for the third time. This company, the operator of sawmills in Alabama, Florida, and Mississippi, this is the third time that they have failed to follow federal workplace safety standards across their organization, according to the Department of Labor, this time resulting in a worker fatality at its Alabama facility. An investigation by OSHA found that this 20-year-old sawmill worker, part of a 6-member crew trying to clear a jammed roller at the company Rex Lumber LLC in Troy, Alabama, in December 2022, was crushed when stored energy caused the infeed unit to close in on him. So OSHA issued a willful citation for allowing workers to perform maintenance on equipment without controlling hazardous energy sources. The company also failed to review its energy control procedures regularly to ensure appliance, and get this, did not train their employees on how to isolate stored energy in hydraulic accumulators. And those are some big fancy words. I'm not totally sure what all of those mean, but these are machines and operations that can and did kill a person 6 months ago, 7 months ago. And the idea that this company did not train their employees on the proper procedures for this machine is absolutely insane, and is why they got a willful citation as opposed to something that was, so the OSHA can give willful citations and they can give other things that are sort of like less than willful, right? That are kind of indicative of, they didn't understand exactly what they were doing, maybe. But if you are not giving your employees training when they're working with deadly machinery, that's willful and evil.
It's messed up.
Yeah.
It is just messed up.
So, like I said, this is the third time that they have been cited by federal investigators. The incident follows tragedies in 2021 and 2020 related to improper machine operations at 2 Rex Lumber sawmills in Florida. At the Graceville, Florida location in 2021, an employee trying to fix a machine's faulty hydraulic valve suffered crushing injuries when they were caught in the machine's wheels and pulleys. A few months before that, in December of 2020, a worker suffered an amputation injury and died in the hospital days later after their hand came in contact with the nip point of a conveyor's roller at the Bristol, Florida location.
Wow.
Really gross stuff here from Rex Lumber LLC. The Department of Labor says that after its investigation in Troy, OSHA assessed the company with $184,000 in proposed penalties. Since 2019, the agency has cited the sawmill operator and its subsidiaries for 12 violations. So the company has 15 days from receipt of the citations and penalties to either comply or request an informal conference with OSHA or contest the findings before the Independent Occupational Safety and Health Review Commission. So a really gross story, and yet another highlighting of the fact that another opportunity to highlight the fact that Alabama has 0 state-level safety and health investigators. And that is on purpose. Another important thing to note is that Alabama is the 7th most deadly state for working people in the country. The 7th most deadly state for working people. That means our deaths on the job per capita is higher than 43 other states. And yet, because we have so little safety regulators and investigators, our injury reporting rate is lower than the national average. So think about that. We have less injuries. This data says we have less injuries than the majority of states, but we have more deaths than almost all of them. Obviously, those numbers are, they don't quite match. And, I think it's pretty obvious the obvious conclusion there is that it's because we don't have any state level regulators. We don't have anybody in the state of Alabama that is tasked with keeping workers safe on the job. So, yeah, real gross stuff there.
Doesn't exactly sound like family values.
No, definitely not family values. But employers aren't the only people interested in killing people in Alabama. There's another story about that from that Lee Hedgepeth brought out, right, Adam?
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to lift up this article by Lee Hedgepeth. He has his own website called Tread, and he's got an article out called Alabama Plans to Gas Condemned Citizens. Are others already at risk? And let me just quote a bit here from this. To set it up, he opens by talking about the Space Shuttle Columbia and folks who died actually from nitrogen. And nitrogen is the gas that the state of Alabama is considering using for executions. And basically, the idea is you are deprived of oxygen. And you are killed that way. Here we are. We've been chatting this morning about air quality and the importance of air quality, and this is, the move that the state of Alabama is making, trying to poison people. And so I wanted to quote here from Lee. Now, more than 4 decades after the men's nitrogen deaths inside Columbia, the state of Alabama is preparing to go where no state has gone before. But does its pursuit of a more grim mission, the taking of a condemned man's life using nitrogen gas, come at the risk of others? Soon, potentially within weeks, Alabama plans to begin executing its citizens using nitrogen gas. The method is untested, having never been systematically used for judicially sanctioned executions. The storage and use of nitrogen gas, lawyers for the state have acknowledged, is risky, posing potentially fatal hazards not only to the state's intended victim, but also to prison workers, spiritual advisors, members of the press, and other incarcerated individuals. So far, however, officials with the Alabama Department of Corrections have refused to answer questions about the process the agency's workers will use to gas condemned individuals, including inquiries about precautions taken to protect staff, witnesses, and others present. But unlike the accident aboard Columbia, which was subject to federal workplace oversight, state-run facilities like prisons operate in a regulatory vacuum in many jurisdictions, including Alabama, compounding the risk of an untested method of execution that may already place workers at risk of injury or death. The storage and planned use of nitrogen gas by the state of Alabama to kill its citizens, despite the admitted risk involved, is not subject to any workplace regulator, state and federal officials confirmed to tread this week. And so I really thought that was interesting. And, the state of Alabama is so bound and determined to kill folks that they are willing to risk the executioners themselves.
Yeah.
And, boy, if that doesn't say something, I don't know what does.
Yeah, you can read more at treadbylee.com. That is treadbylee.com. TreadBylee.com. So the last thing that we want to get to before we wrap up the first half of the program is remembering Minnie Bruce Pratt. She is an Alabama native. She was a women's liberation and LGBTQ activist, a poet and educator. She died last Sunday, surrounded by friends and family in Syracuse, New York, at the age of 76. She was born in 1946. And like I said, a poet, educator, activist, and an essayist. She was born in Selma, Alabama, and raised in Centerville. She retired in 2015 from her position as professor of writing and women's studies at Syracuse University in Syracuse, New York, where she was invited to help develop the university's first LGBT studies program. Adam, tell us a little bit more about her.
Yeah, sure thing. And I really appreciate some of the obituaries and other in memoriam articles that I read about her. Helped me get to know a little bit more about this person who I was frankly not very familiar with. But who
I will say really quickly, I do know that she was a very strong supporter of the miners in Brookwood. I saw her on Twitter frequently, and I think she even made a couple of trips down to Brookwood.
Well, that totally tracks with what I learned about her life. Someone who was a staunch advocate for working people and for the underdog, and that's really what. I think is worth highlighting about her as an Alabamian and as a Southerner. So I did enjoy Mary Hall's article on AO.com, and a couple of things I wanted to pull from there. Pratt was a prolific advocate and writer throughout her life. She pushed the boundaries of feminist teaching and thinking. She wrote poems and essays about race, class, gender, and sexuality, which received awards from the Academy of American Poets, the American Library Association, the Poetry Society of America, Lambda Literary, and the Publishing Triangle. In 2022, she wrote for AO.com that she and other lesbian, transgender, and gender nonconforming people have always been in Alabama. Pratt was born in Selma and graduated from Bibb County High School. She attended the University of Alabama just 1 year after George Wallace stood in the schoolhouse door, according to her website. She has degrees from Tuscaloosa and the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Later in life, she split her time between Syracuse and Centerville. I still consider Alabama my home, Pratt said in a recent interview with Recon News. I'm really unhappy that people don't know I'm from Alabama. I want them to know I'm from Alabama. I'm proud of it. I'm proud of the resistant traditions of Alabama, resistance to oppression that are embedded in the soil there. The Invisible Histories Project, an organization that researches Southern history, calls her, quote, a phenomenal poet, a fierce femme lesbian, a fighter for the working class and marginalized, and an unapologetically Southern woman. She was a Bama girl, said Megan Sullivan, co-founder of the Invisible Histories Project and a friend of Pratt's. She never let it go, regardless of how long she spent in New York or anywhere else. She was always deeply, deeply Southern, very passionate about her hometown and the people that she grew up with. Pratt came out as a lesbian in North Carolina in 1975 and lost custody of her 2 sons as a result. This went on to be the topic of one of her most notable books, Crime Against Nature, titled to reference the sodomy laws that resulted in her losing custody. The reason I lost custody of my children was because I could be charged with a felony, and therefore that was it, she said in an interview with Recon. Quote, I was an unfit mother, boom, my children were taken away. And, that's just such a painful thing to think about as a parent, the idea of the state taking away your children because of who you are. It's just truly despicable. But she bounced back from them. She was a resilient woman. She went on to teach at historically black colleges, and then, ultimately landed at Syracuse, where she started the first LGBT study program. And she was a pioneer. And she was a pioneer in trans rights. She was pro-trans rights before that was popular, or, it was certainly less popular than it is now. And her spouse was a trans activist, Leslie Feinberg. She died in 2014. They were together for 22 years. And, I spoke to a friend of mine who was inspired by Pratt and also quite enjoyed her poetry, particularly her early stuff. And my friend emphasized how she was intersectional before folks really used that word, understanding the way class, race, gender, and more intersect and impact people's lives. And like I said, Pratt was pro-trans rights at a time when it was, much less popular to be so. And throughout all of that, she was a true and proud Southerner and Alabamian. So rest in power, Minnie Bruce Pratt.
Absolutely. That about her, wanting people to know that she was in Alabama, she was an Alabamian, really reminded me of folks that I knew from my childhood who moved from Alabama to Indiana. They were two sisters, and they had two very different reactions to their family moving to Indiana. One of them was very embarrassed of having grown up rural on the mountain in Alabama, and so even before she moved, she began practicing how to sound like a Yankee, so that people wouldn't be able to recognize her as a Southerner. But her little sister did exactly the opposite, and so even after having lived in Indiana for a decade, she has probably the thickest Southern drawl I have ever heard a young woman have. And so I've always thought that was really cool.
Well, you keep it, sister.
Absolutely. We've got a few plugs here, and then we're going to go into overtime, where we're going to give you an update on what's going on with the Teamsters and UPS. We've been alluding to it some during the main show, and we've also got an interview that we're going to be having with Dave Zirin, the sports editor for The Nation.
Really excited about this.
Yes.
I love his stuff. Looking
Absolutely.
forward to it.
It's going to be a lot of fun. So first, check out Labor Notes. You can go to labornotes.org. Every month they have a new training series, and this month they are talking about the assault on pensions and how to fight back. That's going to be on July the 10th, so there's still time to apply and be a part of that, as well as the regular Secrets of a Successful Organizer training. And then from Jobs to Move America, I believe, or no, Resilience to Restoration, they are presenting a summer special Jobs and Justice Zoom webinar with friends of the show, both of them, Kathleen Kirkpatrick and Patricia Todd. That is going to be on Monday, July 17th at 6 p.m. Central. Both of them are friends of the show, former guests, so we know it's going to be a great discussion on clean energy jobs and how we can use them to help working class communities. Also on Monday, July the 17th at 4:30 p.m. at Mae Jemison High School in Huntsville on Pulaski Pike, there's going to be a redistricting town hall held by Representative Anthony Daniels and Laura Hall. For all my elections and voter engagement folks, definitely go check that out if you're in the area and want to hear the latest. Alabama Arise has Tuesday town halls coming up on July the 18th at 6 p.m. Go to our guests' website, Indoor Air Care Advocates, and you can find out more about what they're doing there. We are going to go ahead and head into overtime, where we're speaking to Dave Zirin, plus talking about some big labor stories. So you don't want to miss it. Stay tuned. And until next week, all power to the workers.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Still listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller, and this is the second half of the program. We are off the radio now. We are online only. You can get this as a podcast as well as listen live to the stream, or go back and listen to the stream after it's live. You can also listen to us online on the local internet radio station, Unclaimed Mysteries Radio. They broadcast out of Huntsville, Alabama on Friday mornings is when you can hear Overtime. The following Friday, right, because it's a recording. But you can't hear us anywhere on terrestrial radio right now, folks. That's right. We have we have broken free from the shackles of the FCC censors here in this hour and a half of the program, and we've got some good stuff.
Hell yeah.
You want to just go ahead and get started? You want to jump off with this Teamster stuff, or you want to do something else?
Let's talk about it.
Let's talk about it. All right. So, last week we told y'all that the Teamsters had set a July 5th deadline for a last best and final offer from UPS. And so since then, we learned that negotiations broke down on that day, on July the 5th, at about 4:15 a.m. after a 24-hour bargaining session, from what I can tell, which sounds terrible. I could not imagine spending 24 hours across the table from corporate ghouls talking about how much my members deserve. That would just absolutely drive me crazy, but that's what they did. And so the Teamsters have said that UPS walked away from the bargaining table around 4 a.m. on Wednesday after the National Negotiating Committee unanimously rejected the company's latest substandard offer. The National Negotiating Committee has now left Washington, D.C., and local unions and members are ramping up practice picketing and ready-to-strike actions. The TDU says that the Teamsters for a Democratic Union, which is a reform caucus that backed the Teamsters United slate that put forward Sean O'Brien for president, the Teamsters for a Democratic Union said that the company did not put a last best and final offer on the table. There's still a path for the company to make a contract offer that Teamster negotiators can recommend to the membership, but that path is narrowing and time is running out. We are united as a union and ready to strike if that's what it takes to win, said Teamsters for a Democratic Union co-chair and shop steward Eugene Broswell. And, like we said last week, there have been several points, which is kind of baffling to me. There have been several points where the Teamsters have put down deadlines, and then the deadlines pass without really any ramifications for UPS or any penalties at all, as far as I can see. And, it looks like that's happened again, which, that in and of itself is, to me, not a good sign. But I do think it seems like it has been, it is over, there's more weight on the side that UPS Teamsters are prepared for a strike. We're seeing practice picketing all over the country. There's a lot of energy in the country and within the Teamsters Union for a strike if it is necessary. But it is disappointing to see this continuing, drawing lines and then backing up and allowing UPS to cross them and drawing a line. The first one that I can remember was that the Teamsters said that they will not negotiate on the national level until all of the supplements are resolved, meaning that the regional negotiating committees have agreed to send that supplement with the national when it goes to a vote. And that didn't happen until July the 3rd. They started negotiating the national contract back in January. So, that's huge. That's a huge difference in what they said they were going to do and then what actually happened. Additionally, they said that they set June the 30th as the deadline for a last best and final offer. And then they moved that to July the 5th as the deadline for a last best and final offer. And as you know, if you're listening to the show, presumably, we are now on the 8th of July, and we still don't have a last best and final offer. And, So that's disappointing. And they set this deadline, but they never explained what would happen if UPS didn't meet the deadline. But I think the obvious implication is that, okay, if you don't give us a last best and final offer by this day, then we're going to stop negotiating and we're going to strike. That's kind of that's kind of the way that I would have interpreted it. But that hasn't happened, and so they're still waiting for a last best and final offer, and they're saying that there's still a path to avoid a strike. And so we're going to see what happens going forward, but definitely some mixed stuff going on there as far as I can tell, in my opinion. But Sean O'Brien did make a media tour last week, and he did a very good job, I think, in a lot of these interviews. And so, all that aside, he definitely, I would say, schooled, destroyed corporate media. And so let's take a look at this first one where CNN is kind of credulously repeating some of UPS's talking points, and let's see how Sean O'Brien reacts.
From UPS, they put out a statement. The Teamsters have stopped negotiating despite historic proposals that build on our industry-leading pay. Refusing to negotiate creates significant unease among employees and customers and threatens to disrupt the U.S. economy. You say to that what?
That statement is compelling but highly inaccurate. UPS chose to walk away, and if there is a strike, it's going to be UPS striking themselves.
Does this in some way hurt the
I'll stop there for just a
drivers
second.
and those preloaders? Ultimately, we know after the last strike, there was a loss of some of the business that.
Yeah, and that's that's a really important point to emphasize that, and we know, of course, that there's no reason for the Teamsters to walk away from the table if there's still movement happening. So there's absolutely no reason not to believe the Teamsters side of the story, that UPS is the one that walked away from the negotiating table. I think that even though they did sign an NDA saying that they're not going to discuss specifics, I think that the issues are pretty clear, and it is pretty clear kind of the ballpark that UPS needs to be in for the Teamsters to come to a tentative agreement on economics, which is the last remaining part of this contract. And so the idea that the Teamsters walked away from these negotiations, the idea that they would have done that while movement was still happening, is just really silly. So let's start back from there.
Does this in some way hurt the drivers
Can you rewind it
and
for
those
just a second and go
preloaders?
back to
And if there is a strike, it's going to be UPS striking themselves.
Does this in some way hurt the drivers and those preloaders ultimately? We know after the last strike, there was a loss of some of the business that was not reclaimed. There are some experts and analysts in the field who say that maybe UPS will get 70% back of its business, but maybe not all of it. And of course, that would require potentially fewer preloaders, fewer drivers, and then that comes back to your Teamsters members.
Well, UPS, whatever they choose to do, if they choose to do the right thing and concede to the demands, will be fine. But if they don't, that's a self-inflicted wound that they're going to have to shoulder the burden of that. And look, like anything else, UPS has good times and bad times. This volume will come back. There'll be need to hire more people. So any negative impact on this is going to be self-inflicted by UPS.
And it won't impact your members?
It could, but it's going to be a short-term impact.
Yeah, so I really appreciated Sean O'Brien's responses there, and the framing there is absolutely completely right, and that he put forward, and it always is incredibly frustrating to me when the onus is always placed by the media onto workers. Right? You will not see on CNN or MSNBC, and certainly not Fox News, Carol Tomé in this seat saying, How bad are you, are you not worried about the effect that this is going to have on consumers? Why don't you just give the Teamsters what they're asking for? Why are why are you willing to hurt your employees for all of this? Do you not think that you're asking for too much when you're wanting to make more profits than you have ever made in the history of your company? They made record-breaking profits in 2022. Why do you think it's okay, Carol Tomei, the CEO of UPS, to ask for even more than that in 2023? Why do you think that it's okay after a record-setting profit year to ask for even more from your Teamster drivers? Because remember, we saw that their counterproposal leaked, the UPS counterproposal. They had, as one of their proposals, I mean, the idea of it is just, it's absurd, it's a joke, it's an insult. One of their counterproposals was to cut the top driver pay from $40 an hour to $30 an hour. A 25% pay cut for drivers at the top end of the scale after they made more profits than ever in the history of the company. That's the kind of stuff that they're putting out there, but they are not being asked, do you think you're asking for too much? So it's important to put that into perspective. Let's take a look at Bloomberg asking the same question. Are you worried about the damage this is going to do to the economy? Are you worried you're asking for too much? Let's listen to this on Bloomberg.
There is a deadline looming. If come August 1st there is a strike, is Teamsters not fearful of the potential economic repercussions of that? Couldn't that come back to hurt the very same workers that you were trying to get a better deal for?
Look, in 1997, UPS took the same position with the part-timers, and the Teamsters struck them nationwide.
For 15 days?
15 days. And look, like anything else, every time there's a situation like a strike, there's, short-term pain for a long-term gain. UPS is the best in the business. The customers pay for a service. Our Teamster members provide the best service. We know there's going to be a little bit of pain in the beginning, but UPS is good at recovering and recouping that volume, and we're confident. We have to take a stand now. We have to.
And taking a stand is the only way that the Teamsters have some of the best industry wages and best in the industry healthcare. It's because they have in the past went on strikes. And so the idea that going on strike in and of itself is going to be harmful for the very members that they're trying to protect is it's silly. That's what you have to do to maintain and to get more. But that's not what you're going to hear on some of this corporate media. And so one of the other talking points that UPS is really putting out there is that these workers make, the best in the industry pay. And so therefore, they deserve a pay cut, or they deserve, they don't deserve any more. We deserve all the increased profits. That's the argument that they're making. And so here is on CNN again, the host talking about just how much money package car drivers make.
You acknowledged in your Senate testimony that the starting salary for some of those drivers, $93,000 a year, at the top of the industry. So people who are at home hearing that UPS the workers might be going on strike, and they're already at the top of the heap starting for this, they question why. You tell those folks who are going to be inconvenienced what?
Well, look, I'll tell them this simply. UPS didn't give $93,000 a year out of the kindness of their heart. We've been fighting for decades and decades. We didn't get anything for UPS. We had to fight for it. UPS drivers and preloaders and all part-timers provide tremendous amount of service. UPS is making record profits, $100 billion. They doubled their profits. They need to take care of those people and stop worrying about Wall Street and focus on the people at Main Street.
That's exactly right, and that's a good message that the only reason they have that is because they've been willing to fight. It's not because UPS has been so generous, and we can see that from the fact that UPS is asking for pay cuts, right now amid record-setting profit. And so the fact that, that the Teamsters had to fight is very important to emphasize, but it is also important to contextualize that 93,000 number, and he did that in his appearance on Bloomberg when they brought that up.
The full-timers, they make a great wage. UPS is out there telling people, well, they make $93,000 a year, but they're not telling you they have to work 60 or 65 hours a week to make that wage. So there's a lot of issues, but at the end of the day, we've got the majority of the negotiations have been completed. It's strictly down to economics. They know what we want. They know what we need.
So there you go. $93,000 a year would be a great wage if you only had to work a standard work week of 40 hours. But $93,000 a year to work 65, 60, 70 hours a week, that's like, I wouldn't do it. You'd have to pay me more than that to get me to work 70 hours a week. So it's just like, it's okay. It's okay. For 60, 70 hours a week, $93,000 is okay. That's my view. So another thing that they're putting out there that is really, just seems to me to be just totally false is the rate of the part-time drivers. We just actually heard earlier in the program from a part-time driver who's been there for 13 years and makes $21 an hour. 13 years. $21 an hour, and UPS is telling Bloomberg that their full-time drivers are making $39 an hour and their part-timers are making $35 an hour. Let's hear how Sean O'Brien reacts to that.
Have collapsed, but this is important when we talk about wages. For example, a full-time employee at UPS makes about $39 an hour. A part-time employee makes about $5 less. What's also important is health and safety was coming up. This is going to be a common theme among labor conversations across the country, across industries. But working conditions like air conditioning and trucking, for example, or simply how many days you get off. But again, at the core of it comes, are these workers being paid in line with the profits that UPS is making?
Bloomberg's Kriti Gupta joining us from World Headquarters in New York. We thank you for the reporting. Kriti, let's get more perspective now on the UPS negotiations from the union's perspective. Joining us here at the table, Sean O'Brien, General President of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. Sean, it's great to have you here. Thank you for joining us at what appears to be a critical moment. You tweeted, or the Teamsters tweeted at least, at about 4:30 in the morning on Wednesday. After marathon sessions, UPS negotiations collapsed. You're right, around 4 a.m., UPS walked away from the bargaining table after presenting an unacceptable offer to the Teamsters that did not address members' needs. UPS spoke with Bloomberg about this and says, we have not walked away, and the union has a responsibility to remain at the table. When will you talk next?
Whenever they pick up the phone and call us. Their story is compelling but highly inaccurate. We were talking about economics, and we did make a lot of progress on a lot of those issues that were talked about earlier. But when it came down to part-timers, I'll tell you what. If they're saying that part-timers make $5 less than $39 an hour, I'll sign that deal right now. That's not true. Our average part-timer is making starting wage rates about $16.50 per hour. You've got people living in poverty. Those are poverty wages. A lot of members in the big cities that work 2 or 3 jobs, especially the part-timers, are on subsidized housing, food stamps. So it's up to UPS to make this right, and they should tell the real story.
Okay, so you said you would sign a deal at $5 less per hour. Is that your bare minimum? What's the line here?
Well, if they were going to pay $35 an hour for a part-timer, I definitely would do that. That's what they're saying. That's not the truth. They do provide great benefits, but they provide them only because we mandate them. We've fought decades upon decades to negotiate superior conditions in these industries, and now it's time. Look, think about the pandemic. You see a UPS driver, the men and women that deliver in your neighborhoods, everybody loves them. But the unsung heroes are the ones that load those trucks, that went to work. And UPS had record profits, $100 billion.
Is that number that...
Yeah, absolutely. That's really important to understand when they're talking about these part-time rates. And so, if UPS is going out there and saying our part-timers make $35 an hour, Sean O'Brien is calling the bluff and saying, okay, well, give us that contract and we'll sign it today. So that's where we're at right now with the... with these Teamster negotiations, and that's some of the stuff that's at stake. So we're obviously going to be updating y'all every week. And next week, we're actually going to be talking to Teddy Ostro from the Upsurge podcast to kind of contextualize this situation. And in particular, we're going to get some history on the 1997 strike, learn what the issues were there and what Teamsters were able to win. So definitely check us out next week. We're going to go ahead and bring Dave Zirin on to the show. Dave Zirin is a prolific author of acclaimed books. He is the sports editor for The Nation and the host of a new show for the Real News Network, which is a friend of the show. Maximilian Alvarez, the editor-in-chief there, has been a guest multiple times on this show. We've been a guest on his show multiple times. So really great to see Dave and Max partnering. Dave, welcome to the show.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, really appreciate it. Really, I enjoy your work. I've been a longtime reader, so it's a joy to have you on the show. But for those who are not familiar with you, could you introduce yourself and just tell folks a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, my name's Dave Zirin. I'm the sports editor over at The Nation magazine, their first sports editor. They didn't used to do that until I started doing it, the many years ago. And I write books about the politics of sports. The most recent one is called The Kaepernick Effect. It's about how young people took knees in the aftermath of Colin Kaepernick doing so as a part of resistance against racism and police violence. I'm a big believer in labor, so it's an honor to be on this show. I do a lot of study of sports labor, which of course is profoundly distorted relative to the rest of the labor movement, but still invaluable. It has that weird contradictory space there. Right. Between something very important and very weird. And I'm thrilled to be on the show to talk about these issues. And by the way, I'm doing a TV show on the Real News Network called Edge of Sports, working with Max Alvarez, Kayla Rivara, and I'm having an absolute blast.
Yeah, tell us more about that, because as Jacob mentioned earlier, we are big fans of the Real News Network, big fans of Maximilian Alvarez. We consider him, comrades and friends. And so talk to us more about this new show. I'm really excited about this collaboration.
Well, I am too, because I've been doing pilots for shows for years, for like a decade. And I've had a very specific idea of the kind of show that I'd want to do, and that has proven to be antithetical to a lot of networks, sports channels. I mean, you name
we wouldn't know anything about that at all.
So you know what it's like then to sit in a pitch meeting, say something you believe in, and have people say, we would love to have you if only you do the same thing except without what you believe in.
Yeah. Absolutely.
You know that feeling. Like I've had people say, the movie Barton Fink, which is, by the way, down low, a great political movie.
Yes,
the Coen Brothers film, great political movie. There's this great scene, though, where the Hollywood executive says to Barton Fink, the socialist playwright, he says, yeah, we don't want all the worker stuff, but we want that Barton Fink feeling. And that feeling is what I've been asked for a few times without actually getting into the political weeds. And I love doing the show because it's all political weeds. That doesn't mean we don't take a step back and talk about it, but every week I have on a guest, and it could be from the sports world, could be from the political world. And the first show we had DeMaurice Smith, as someone you are familiar with, the executive director, the former, we have to say, executive director of the NFL Players Association. And, DeMaurice wanted to call the show The Exit Interview. And we got in deep about what it's like to head up that, again, this word distorted, that very distorted union that is the NFL Players Association. Mm-hmm. And it's just been a blast. I want to add that I do a segment every week called Ask a Sports Scholar, where I get someone on who's like a left sports academic, and they speak about the research they're doing. And that's, I think, really fascinating as well.
That's really cool. I'm all about it. I love that. And I was actually going to ask you about that interview with Smith and the NFLPA, since there is this like transition now. And he was actually rumored to be a candidate for Secretary of Labor at one time, supposedly. And now the NFLPA has new leadership. And I'm curious, like, what's your take on that? And how do you think the NFLPA is going to move forward?
Yeah, the new leader is a guy named Lloyd Howell Jr., and he was a former, I believe the title was COO of Booz Allen. So, it's not a pick I would have wanted at all. It was done not by D. Smith, not by anybody else there. I mean, the way it works is that it's entirely done by the players. Players do the interviewing, players do the voting, players decide who the next person is. DeMaurice Smith does not have a finger on this particular scale. And it's interesting because DeMaurice Smith didn't come from a labor background either. And this is a complicated thing, but I have a lot of respect for what DeMaurice Smith was able to do, while a lot of people sort of my ilk are very critical. And of course, I'm critical the way I think we should be critical of all, union leaders, union bureaucrats.
Right.
I was listening to what you were talking about with UPS, and I agree with that entirely with regard to the Teamsters. It's got to be, with the workers always, with the union leaders sometimes, and with the bosses never. And,
yeah,
and
you're
DeMaurice,
preaching our gospel.
yeah, I had a feeling that would be met well. And DeMaurice is with the union leaders sometimes, but I also think he was put in a very difficult situation, not the least of which because he came at the job as a big-time lawyer, as somebody who worked with Eric Holder in the Justice Department, as someone who was a federal prosecutor. And this new guy, COO of Booz Allen, to me, that just doesn't, check the boxes of what you really want to see in terms of who's heading up your union. But, a lot of players are taken in by something that DeMaurice Smith is very disavowed of. That if you just have somebody like a former COO of Booz Allen, that's the sort of thing the franchise owners are going to respect. And they're going to sit down and go down to business. They're not seeing, and part of this is because the typical NFL career is only 3.5 years. So believe me, in talking and interviewing DeMaurice for these last, I think, 14 years, and that's how long our very regular political relationship has been in. Getting institutional memory in a union where the average membership is 3.5 years long is extremely challenging. So imagine if there have been people who've been NFL players for 30 years. I know that's absurd given what their bodies would look like after playing 30 years in the NFL, not to mention their minds, but you would have people who would say, wait a minute, we need an adversarial leader. That's what DeMaurice said in our interview. I said, what did you wish you'd known when you first took this job as executive director of the NFLPA? And he said, I wish I wasn't so naive as to think that the people I was talking to believed in the law. That's how he put it, starkly, believed in the law. Yeah. And some of that has to do with the antitrust exemption that the NFL operates. Some of that has to do with that these are just very scuzzy people. And they will go to any lengths to mess over the players. And DeMaurice thought he was going in, as I think a lot of unions sort of repeat this rhetoric, but DeMaurice was going in feeling like, oh, this is going to be about cooperation.
Right.
This is about labor management cooperation. And here he is sitting down with some of the most viciously anti-union people who think in principle there should not even be a union.
Right.
And expecting to negotiate with those folks in good faith. So I have very, very apprehensive feelings about this new leader, Lloyd Howell. And, but you know what it's like. It's show and prove. Not going to judge him by his past, judge him by what he does. But the tea leaves aren't great.
Right.
For sure. And we know that you've got a heart out at 11:40. We want to be respectful of that. And we want to talk some about the...
Oh, can I tell you why I have a heart out?
Sure.
Just so you can have a big laugh.
All right.
I have to pick my son up from high school football practice.
Hey, there you go. There you go.
Yes, I am extremely aware of the attendant irony.
Well, that's great. I'm sure that when I have kids that they're going to want to play sports. So and Adam is already doing some of that.
I've already lived the softball dad life. Yeah, believe me.
And
that's a good one.
So I want to talk some about we want to talk some about these the below the NFL unionization efforts. The USFL recently unionized. There's talk of NCAA unionization. The XFL had a union vote with the Steelworkers, which is who USFL unionized with. But interestingly, they voted it down. And I saw on Twitter we were the first to break that news, and so our tweet got a lot of traction, particularly among XFL players, and there were a lot of XFL players tagging the NFLPA, saying things like, it's not that we don't want to unionize, we just want to unionize with the right folks. And then they tagged NFLPA. So I'm interested in your thoughts about that. But before we go, while we're on the NFL, I wonder if you think that the NFL Players Association could learn something from some of the graduate worker unions that have been successful, because that you mentioned about the turnover rate in union membership is something that virtually no union has to deal with except graduate workers. And there are graduate workers recently who have been going through a wave of unionization, and a lot of them have been winning excellent first contracts. So I wonder if you think that there's any opportunity for collaboration and learning there.
Yeah, and also, I followed the situation at Rutgers very closely, where as part of the deal, they were able to raise the wage floor, which of course creates terrific solidarity where there are usually divisions in a university strike. If you show that you're really looking out and fighting for the people who need it the most. I'd love to see what you're talking about. I want the NFLPA to expand its mandate and be front and center. And it has been, you got to say, with the NCAA, like they've provided attorneys, they've provided advice, they've provided, friendly affidavits to any court efforts. But it's not as hands-on a role as a lot of people would want to see who've done the NCAA organizing. And I think what I would want to get from the grad workers union is just how expansive a lot of those grad students, you should correct me if I'm wrong about this, but have been organized by the UAW, correct?
Mm-hmm. The UAW and the UE, I think, are the leading grad worker unions.
And the UE. Yeah, so you've got electrical workers and auto workers, and obviously they've been doing this for years, but bringing in people from other industries and using their know-how and organizing skills to do so. I want to see the NFLPA do that a lot more. And hopefully we'll see. This is the problem. And I don't want to just talk about the problems, because I believe in labor and I believe every problem can be overcome. But you've run into an issue with NFL players who don't want the union with that broader mission. And one thing the NFLPA is very, very conscious of is, they care a little less about retired players speaking out against them and their benefits, partly because it's something that they're used to at this point, and they've increased the benefits pretty dramatically. If you notice, that's been quieted somewhat in terms of the retired players in the last couple of years. The last contract increased their give out in a pretty big way. But a lot of the players feel like you're spreading us way too thin, and the NFLPA does not want the players speaking out against the union. So I'd like to really see them have a broader mandate and see themselves having a broader mandate, because they're part of the AFL-CIO, and Major League Baseball looks like it's going in that direction as well. I think it's great for sports unions to be part of the AFL-CIO. It just increases what they're able to do. So hopefully we'll see a broader mandate with the new leadership. I'd like to see it.
Hope so, yeah. Hope springs eternal. And in the last 4 minutes we've got you, what are some of your thoughts on some of these campaigns to unionize the leagues and the collegiate athletes under the NFL?
Profoundly important, way overdue. And you're starting to see the outrage and the fainting couch reaching and the pearl clutching of a lot of NCAA and university leaders. We can't treat these revenue producing athletes like workers. Right. They don't want to be workers. They're students. Yeah. He said it's outrageous to even consider them workers. The worst argument is that, and they're making this in a legal setting, that 75 years of precedent is enough to tell us that these are not workers. It's are you kidding me? Precedent? There was also precedent around the Washington football team name, but they changed that. They're precedent on a lot of things that we got to change. And also, we're living in a country where certain precedents that we held dear have been overturned by this Supreme Court like they were nothing. So I don't want to hear anybody from that group of people trying to protect their own power and privilege talking about precedent. Yeah, there's been 75 years of injustice. Thank you for pointing that out. Appreciate it.
Right.
Yeah, and one of the things that that's being objected to by the good guys, by the good people, is this term student athlete, and finally putting that in the graveyard where it belongs. That's a made up legal term meant to justify basically not paying them. It was actually created when a player died on the field and his wife tried to sue for workers' comp. And they said, you're not a worker, you're a student athlete. And so they enshrined that as a legal definition to prevent paying workers' comp to a widow.
Wow.
So
I had no idea.
Yeah. So that's your starting point for the people that we're dealing with, because they are workers. I mean, we could say they shouldn't be workers. You know, they're students, blah, blah, blah. But, you know, you can say lots of things. You can say you don't believe in gravity when you fall out of an airplane. It doesn't matter. They are workers. And so if they are workers, just by objective reality, then they really do need to be unionized, because they are held in such a position of powerlessness with regards to working conditions, with regards to health care. I mean, let alone pay. We're talking about just being able to prevent injury. And the structure is so authoritarian that, to me, a union could not come too soon.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, interestingly, you know, we said with the bosses never, but Nick Saban, of all people, has come out and been, you know, I think tentatively supportive of a NCAA union. And I think that, you know, that could lend some credibility.
I think that's a big damn deal, especially down here.
Yeah, and you know, and Saban, I'll call him more managerial class than a boss for the purposes of this discussion. But really, more from the question of power than his unbelievable salary than anything else. But I really wonder if there's some sort of causal connection between Nick Saban being one of the few college coaches and doing this in Alabama, just a huge deal, just to really try to step up after George Floyd was murdered in 2020.
I wondered the same thing.
Because, you know, a lot of coaches, particularly in the South, but not exclusively, hello, Jim Harbaugh, came down hard on players for even talking about doing something, even talking about it. They were disciplined. And here's Nick Saban marching with players. I forget if it was from or to a Confederate statue, but it was part of trying to get the statue torn down. Now, I'm sorry, but that takes, you know, some real guts.
Yeah,
it does.
And I mean, you know, and we know as labor people, and we all agree that ideas do have the capacity to change and struggle. And who knows, maybe that jarred a thing or two in old Nick's head. I mean, I certainly love at least thinking that.
Yeah.
Same here. Well, I know we've got to get you out of here, but Dave, I really, really appreciate your time, and we'd love to have you back on, and really looking forward to a lot of success with the new show. Just, you know, keep up the great work.
Thank you. And folks can check out the show on the Real News Network. You can find it on YouTube very easily. We air new shows Wednesday at 7 p.m. This week's show, I'm so psyched. We're going to have Dr. Harry Edwards on, the most famous, all that stuff, sports scholar and the history of sports scholars. I mean, we're talking about somebody who helped organize the 68 Olympic protests and somebody who was a counselor to Colin Kaepernick 50 years later. That's a hell of a run.
Yeah.
So
I'm looking forward to that. That's great. Awesome.
Right. It's going to be awesome. And I would love to come back to the show if possible.
Absolutely.
Hopefully when my son isn't, texting me and whining.
All right. Sounds good. Dave, appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Have a good one.
Thanks, y'all.
All right, that was great. Dave Zirin, sports editor of The Nation, host of the new show Edge of Sports for the Real News Network. Check it out. New episodes Wednesdays at 7 p.m.
Yeah, I'm thrilled about that collaboration. Really, I think it's great, and I love when, you know, my passions intersect. I'm the bigger sports fan here between the two of us, but yeah, big fan of Dave's work. And appreciate his appearance. And I totally agree in regards to college football player unionization. For those of you who don't know, the NLRB did issue a complaint recently where they stated flat out they believed that the players are employees and should be treated as such, and that would open the door for unionization. And so it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. And like you said, Jacob, I appreciate Nick Saban for being on the right side of history here.
Roll Tide.
That's right.
Roll Tide. So we've got a phone number. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That's 844-899-8857 if you've got anything to add. So one of the other big labor stories, there's basically like three really big kind of national stories that have penetrated the consciousness as far as labor goes, and that is the Teamsters and UPS, which we have very much been seeing in our YouTube analytics, but also the WGA strike and Starbucks. And so we've got updates for the latter two in addition to Teamsters and UPS. And so let's take a look at the WGA strike. And the WGA strike is... well, I said I had updates. There's not really a whole lot of updates. The thing is basically in the same place that it's been for about 2 months now. Is that right?
Yeah, I believe so.
They've been on strike for almost 2 months. No movement, at least from what we can tell in the media. Adam Conover has been making the rounds on different shows. He also did a webinar with the Emergency Workplace Organizing Committee, which is a project of the DSA and UE, where he was talking about the strike and dropped some really interesting knowledge that I did not know. I did not realize this. But he said that under the NLRA, you have a right as an individual, even though under Taft-Hartley there is a prohibition on secondary strikes and secondary boycotts by unions and organizations that are not directly involved in the labor dispute, you still, under the NLRA, have the individual right not to cross a picket line, regardless of what your contract says.
Oh.
And I did not realize that.
So your union could not necessarily collectively decide
but
boycott
your union
to
could
strike, but you could inform all of your members of their individual rights they have.
Yeah, and you can't be disciplined for that. It's illegal to be disciplined for exercising your right as an individual to honor picket lines, which is how actually the writers have been able to shut down productions in Hollywood and New York. They've had IATSE folks, they've had actors, they've had directors turn around and refuse to work, refuse to cross the picket line, as is apparently their individual right under the National Labor Relations Act. And so that's why, at least for the writers, the picket lines have been so important in keeping up the strike and making it as effective as possible. So that was a really cool piece of information that I am glad I have now. But I wanted to bring up the strike to be able to talk about this. It's been a couple of weeks ago now that this happened, but an Apple executive did an anonymous interview with an online media outlet called All Your Screens. The name of the outlet is All Your Screens. I've never heard of it before, but it sounds kind of like a techie thing. Talks about tech news or whatever. So an anonymous Apple TV Plus executive talked about the strike and talked about streaming, and he really just the mask just fell off. It was totally really some gross stuff that he was saying about the writers that really is exactly the kind of stuff that we're saying on the show every week, but it's not something that you expect people to admit. And so Kim Kelly screen capped some of the stuff on Twitter, and here's one of the crazier quotes. The question from All Your Screens is, we're a bit more than a month into the WGA strike. What is your sense on how it's going from the studio side? And the anonymous Apple executive said, to be clear, I'm not part of the direct conversations, or I don't have any direct responsibility on negotiating strategy, but I do have pretty good perspective on where we are as a company. Like most of the people aren't C-suite management, I am sympathetic to a lot of the arguments put forth by the writers. I think the current mini-room situation has had a real impact on the future of our industry, and we definitely need to figure out a way to train young writers. That being said, this is all about money. Any streaming platform is looking for cost savings anywhere they can be found. Is it coming out of the writers' pockets? For sure. But it's not personal, this guy assures us. It's not personal. Since it's not personal, they just take my money then, if it's not personal. That makes it all better. It's not personal. This isn't a matter of not wanting to pay writers what they're worth, but when we are trying to watch budgets, you cut anywhere you can. And the truth is, that includes writers and other support staff. Which gets back to my point about the strike. The only way writers will get more money or time or anything else is by getting what they want into a contract. So really crazy stuff. Here's another one. The question from the media site says, how effective are the WGA memes that contrast the pay of top executives with the rate spent on writers? The Apple executive says, it's a fine PR move, but it doesn't move the dial in negotiations. Media companies don't see the world that way. You could cut the CEO pay in half, but that doesn't mean the money will end up in the pockets of writers. This isn't a situation where the streaming companies don't appreciate the value of writing in the content ecosystem. We do, but we will pay the absolute minimum that we can. I see people online blaming streaming for all of this, but this is how all businesses work. When a company moves its factory to Mexico or its customer service functions to Costa Rica, it's not personal. It's not personal. It's not because companies' executives hate their employees or don't value them. It's just a simple profit-loss equation. And that's the case here. Streaming platforms are going to pay the least amount they can for everything, writers included. I don't mean to sound like a dick, but writers tend to be smart and love what they do. But they can also think they're the center of the fucking universe. I know this strike is personal for them. I get it. I'd feel the same way, but this is all just numbers for the studios. What's the least amount we can get away with paying for everything?
Wow.
Really, really gross stuff.
But surprisingly frank.
Surprisingly frank, indeed. Which is, that's what we're saying. That's the song and dance that we're doing every week here on this show, is that, they don't care about you. Your bosses don't care about you. Company loyalty is bullshit. And so you shouldn't respect it, and you should take what you can and get it into a contract. Go in, do your job, and then go home and don't think about it anymore, because they're not thinking about you other than how much they can extract from you. So, it's not personal. It's not personal. It's not personal on our side either, right?
Right. We are selling our labor in exchange for our life.
It's just a business decision. I remember this fella that I used to go to church with. He had this story about how he left a job for one where he made more money, and his boss was chastising him. And the funny thing is this, it wasn't even in like a care industry. This guy wasn't a therapist. He wasn't a nurse. He wasn't a doctor. He wasn't a teacher or anything like this where you or working for a nonprofit saving the world. He was working in like a machine shop, So like, the idea that the boss would say this, but his manager was like chastising him, and one of the things that the last thing that he said was, "You're just in this for the money, aren't you?" And like, yes, I'm not working in a machine shop because I'm passionate about machining. I'm working in a machine
shop,
yeah.
Right? Like,
what a dumbass.
That is wild.
What a stupid thing to say to a guy in a machine shop. Of all places.
You're just trying to pay your bills, aren't you? You think you're just trying to make a living, huh?
Yeah.
Crazy. Yeah, because it's like, no disrespect to the machine shop or where you work, but at the end of the day, we're all selling our time, our energy, our brain power, our muscle. We're selling that in exchange for some kind of wage and benefit, and we hope it's enough to scrape a living, you know, together. That's just the life for the majority of people in this country and across this world. And that's why we have a lot in common.
Exactly. Have we already? Did you ever find out if we had talked about this IATSE stuff?
I'm not sure.
Maybe we did. I'm not sure. But we can just mention it just really quickly, and that we don't have to do a whole thing about it because I think maybe we talked about it before, but I'm not totally sure. But the Stagehand Union, they earmarked $2 million in support of members affected by the ongoing WGA strike, and so like we said, the IATSE is not in a strike right now, but they can honor picket lines, and sometimes the production is shut down or doesn't happen because of the writer's strike. And so the union has set aside $2 million to be distributed through industry-recognized charities to support IATSE members in need during the ongoing writer's strike. So really cool stuff from IATSE, and important to support your members and allow them to show solidarity with the writers as they're on strike.
Right, absolutely. I mean, that's what you have to do. We have to support each other, and if we're going to display solidarity, as so many of my IATSE kin have done, we really absolutely have to support them and provide material assistance. So, yeah, I really appreciate that.
Yep. So let's talk about the latest in Starbucks news. Starbucks is, like I said, one of those stores, and then I see that we got a caller, so after we hit this, we will bring the caller on the line. So sit tight if you are able to. But so Starbucks, this is another one of those labor stories that has really kind of captured people's imagination, I think probably because similar to the UPS workers, Starbucks workers, we see these people every day, or, we see these people a lot. I don't go to Starbucks every day, but I go to Starbucks sometimes. And so you're familiar with these people. So maybe that's one of the reasons that it's kind of penetrated the consciousness of folks. But on July the 5th, the union put out a statement saying that at this point, over 3,500 Starbucks workers at 150 stores, more than 150 stores across the United States, across 9 days nationwide, led the biggest strike in Starbucks history. Partners deserve better pay, better hours, better benefits, and better treatment in the workplace, and our union is fighting to make this company truly live up to its values, especially after their hypocritical treatment of LGBTQIA+ workers. Thank you to everyone for your support and love while we stand up to demand Starbucks bargain with us in good faith. Head over to sbworkersunited.org to organize your store and learn more about what we're demanding and why we went on strike. Also, there are 2 stores that are organized across the state of Alabama. And of course, if you are a Starbucks barista listening to us here in Alabama or anywhere across the country, you're of course free to reach out to us. And if you're in Alabama, we can put you in touch directly with some of the other baristas and the local organizer with Starbucks Workers United. We are absolutely happy to do that, but of course you can go to sbworkersunited.org if you if you're more comfortable with that. But if you're familiar with us and it would make you more comfortable, you can obviously reach out to us. Another big update on the Starbucks front is, you'll remember that we talked about Starbucks closing 3 stores in Ithaca after all 3 had voted to unionize. I think that Ithaca was the first city in the country to have every single Starbucks location to be unionized, and they closed every single location in Ithaca. And amazingly, Starbucks has said that this is just a coincidence. It is not. Yeah, it's not because these workers unionized and practiced their constitutional rights to speech and association. But this was just a it was just because of issues with the stores that had absolutely nothing to do with worker organization, nothing to absolutely in no part to dissuade other workers from unionizing or anything like that. That's what Starbucks is saying. But of course, I mean, that's so silly. I can't, if anybody believes that, I mean, that's wild. I've got oceanfront property in Tennessee to sell you. And so that intuition that you have, if you're not like a baby, that Starbucks did not just randomly close these unionized stores, that intuition that you have has been verified by a U.S. National Labor Relations Board judge, Arthur Amchin. He wrote in his ruling last week that the shutdown of a store near Cornell University's campus, quote, was done in large part to discourage unionization efforts in Ithaca and elsewhere, end quote. He also said that Starbucks failed to prove that it would close the store absent its animus towards the pro-union employees who worked there. In his ruling, Amchin wrote that Starbucks repeatedly violated the National Labor Relations Act in Ithaca, including by punishing union supporters and, quote, suggesting to an employee that it would continue to violate the act regardless of what the NLRB decided, end quote. Along with the reopening of the College Avenue location and reinstating terminated employees with back pay, he wrote that the company should be forced to post a notice about workers' rights at its cafes throughout the country. So we'll see what happens. Obviously, Starbucks is still disputing this, and they will almost certainly appeal this to a U.S. district judge, which is going to take another 6 months, another year or something. I mean, we are now probably almost a year since this location closed. I mean, this has been going on for a very long time, and this is, it's indicative of how toothless and how slow the process is for unionization, and that's why it's so important. That's indicative of how little teeth and how slow the process is for enforcing your rights through the law, through the government, through the NLRB. And that emphasizes the importance of unionization, of building power in the workplace so that you don't actually have to rely on the law. Because if we saw a critical mass of Starbucks stores unionize, where they have a significant impact on the company's bottom line internationally and nationally,
right.
Then they're not going to need the NLRB. They're not going to need the NLRB. They can just negotiate in a contract that, okay, we're going to reopen these stores, we're going to give these people their jobs back with this amount of back pay, and then they can drop all the charges and everybody can go forward. That's what happens in contract negotiations all the time, in fact. There are disputes between employees and employers in union workplaces across the country all the time that because the legal process takes so long, you can just go to the next contract bargaining session and resolve it there. Say, okay, we're going to do this. And so that's what workers would have the power to do without asking for permission from the government if more Starbucks workplaces organized. And so that's why it's important to organize, because the more people that do, the more power that you're going to have.
Right, right.
Some background that was in Josh Idelson's piece in Bloomberg, which, interestingly, Josh Idelson is a very good labor reporter for Bloomberg magazine or the website. Very good labor reporter. I've got a lot of respect for him. So he said that regional NLRB directors around the country have issued over 90 complaints accusing Starbucks of illegal anti-union tactics, including refusing to negotiate fairly, while judges and NLRB members have ordered reinstatement of 23 terminated activists. Complaints are considered by NLRB judges, whose ruling can be appealed to labor board members in Washington, D.C., and from there into federal court. The agency has the power to order policy changes and back pay, but not to make companies pay punitive damages or hold executives personally liable for wrongdoing. So, obviously going to keep an eye on that, but it's, similar to the NLRB ruling related to Warrior Met last week that we talked about. It's great to see it. But there's still not going to be any action on this for a long time to come, and that's why it's important that workers take matters into their own hands, and so there we go. like I said, we've got a caller in the queue. So, Adam, let's bring them on and
Sure thing.
See what they have to say.
Adam and Jacob, how are you? It's Infinite.
Infinite Content. Thanks for calling in.
And thanks for holding for a second there. We appreciate your patience.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I did see that you sent us this, and I read this article about, and I think I saw it on Twitter. It's an insane story. We've been talking about child labor across the country.
Yeah, let's get into it.
Yeah, we've been talking about child labor across the country for years now, for at least a year and a half. It's been kind of a big story. And this is coming out of Wisconsin. A 16-year-old boy died Saturday from injuries sustained in an industrial accident at a sawmill. I mean, we were talking about deaths at sawmills in Alabama just a moment ago.
Not today. It was last Saturday.
Yeah.
Now, even Stevie Wonder and Ray Charles could have seen, if you roll back child labor laws, this was going to be an inevitability, correct?
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
Now, I'm like, isn't Wisconsin the state that's going to okay 14-year-olds are serving alcohol?
Yes, I believe so. Wisconsin is one of those states where there are efforts to lower the child labor laws. So here in this article, it says the death comes amid a push over the last 2 years to loosen regulations governing what jobs minors can perform in the workplace. Wow. Lawmakers in 14 states, including Wisconsin, have proposed rolling back child labor laws, according to the Economic Policy Institute. So, this is why you don't do that, is because it's never a good thing for a worker to die on the job. But it is made even more sad when it's a child.
Yeah, and all because they don't want to pay adults or deal with adults wanting to have better working conditions and better pay. This is just a tragedy, and if there is a way that the parents could sue the state legislators who voted for this, I would be all for it, because this is a direct consequence of this. Right. I don't think anybody. The only thing that a child could do at a sawmill plant, in my opinion, is work the phones.
Yeah, right.
That's it. Nowhere near any type of production. I mean, because sawmill plants are already inherently dangerous. Like, you accidentally get a spark lit in a sawmill plant while it's running, you can blow the whole plant up. But this, corporate greed. Now, there was another story I sent you all, because you all know about Moms for Liberty, right?
Yes.
They decided they wanted to have their convention in Philly. So if you go check your inbox on Twitter, and Kim Kelly wrote a nice little review of how things went there. Mm-hmm. It did not go well for them at all.
For The Nation, in fact, actually. We were just talking
for The
to the
Nation,
sports editor. But yeah, she wrote a really good article for The Nation talking about the reception that they received in Philly. And her reporting on it is that it did not go great.
No. Philly was not having it.
Way to go, Philly.
And, while they were out there trying to have their little speeches, they had a whole Pride event, dance-offs, and festivals out there. And the thing that annoyed me the most is that the police showed up to give them, the Moms for Liberty people, comfort and aid and escorts. I'm like, no. What?
Oh, did we lose him? Did we lose him, or did I get lost?
No, Infinite, are you there? I think we may have lost Infinite Content. I'm going to drop you and call back. You can call back. I don't know what happened there. But, yeah, thanks for shouting that out. Yeah, it's called Moms for Liberty Came to Philly. Philly Came for Them by Kim Kelly at The Nation. And, yeah, shout out to Philly for the rude reception they gave Moms for Liberty. friend of mine, comrade of mine, told me that one of those Moms for Liberty people are going to be speaking in Alabama soon. So I'm working to find out more details about that because, not interested.
Yeah.
Not interested one bit.
Nope.
Those people are bizarre creeps who are trying to destroy public education. And that's about all I got to say about them.
Speaking of people that want to destroy public education, that James Lindsay guy is coming to Alabama in August. Are you familiar with James Lindsay? You may not be familiar because you're not online.
Is that being promoted by 1819 News?
Yes.
Okay. Maybe this is the fellow I'm thinking of. Because isn't Lindsay associated with Moms for Liberty?
I think tangentially.
Okay.
I think so. I think he has
probably run in the same circles.
They run in the same circles. His big shtick is very much like the advocating for school privatization because the schools are just too woke and they're trying to trans the kids. That's
Jesus, help him.
Yeah.
Help him specifically, please. Yeah, that's wrong. Well, yeah, we should find out more details about that.
Is he back on the line?
Let's see. All right. Infinite, are you back?
I'm back. I don't know what happened. I was just one of my yapping. That thing, I guess y'all are like, you're talking too much. Let me just shut him down real quick.
No, you went quiet there. I don't know what happened, but we left off. You were telling us about Moms for Liberty with Philly.
Oh yeah, they got protested everywhere they were, and they tried to talk to some people like on platforms and down in Center City, and got told exactly what they can do because Philly ain't having it. We're just not having it. That I give them no peace, give them no quarter. That group, they put the 14 words on their page. After that, I'm like, they like the SPLC. It's already defined them as a hate group. So SPLC, for you people that don't know, is Southern Poverty Law Center. They study and follow hate groups and national dangerous groups around the country. So if SPLC says that they're a hate group, they are. Trust what you see because they do nothing. Like these Karens literally need to go get hobbies. And there was one last thing, and I'm gonna get off the phone and I'll let you all touch base about it. Ron DeSantis, because Ron DeSantis has to do things all the time, he signed a bill in Florida that is going to cut permanent alimony for spouses. So there's a lot of older women who are all now they're clutching their pearls. Like, I can't believe he's going to do that. It's going to ruin me. No, I need them to have that same energy that they kept about themselves when they supported him for the anti-immigrant bans and the DEI bans and the quote-unquote woke bans and the book bans. Now he came for your money.
Right.
Now, actions have consequences. Anyway, we'll talk later. Bye.
All right.
Appreciate
Thanks
you.
for the call. Appreciate it.
Did not know that about Ron DeSantis. I mean, of course, not surprised. Not surprised. The dude is a creep and seems intent on targeting like every possible group he can find.
And so next is the divorced dads.
I don't know. I imagine the divorced dads is like the core foundation of the DeSantis coalition.
Well, he's just gonna.
If he comes for them, like he's. I don't know. I don't know that he could do that. That seems like his base.
No, I was meaning with the reduction in alimony.
Oh,
he's coming for them and like reaching out to them and say, hey,
you're right.
Yeah.
I bet you so, because I mean, to me, it seems like that's probably his base, and so.
And that's one of the things. Another
middle to upper class divorced dads.
Yeah, well, another phenomenon you may not be familiar with because you're not super online is that there's this kind of red pill type community that has come into prominence over the last couple of years. That's. I mean, just really bizarre, but one of the big things that they talk about is how marriage is bad because women will just break up with you and steal your money. And this is what always happens, despite the fact that, like, what is it, 5% of divorced men pay alimony? It's like not...
seems like a lot of projection.
Yeah.
It definitely seems like a lot of projection. But, you know, a lot of reactionary politics, that's what it boils down to a lot of times.
Yep. So, hey, let's keep talking about coffee, and let's head over to Tennessee, because Starbucks workers are not the only coffee workers that are unionizing. In fact, coffee workers at local chains across the country are unionizing as well. And in particular, there's a really big move in Nashville with the UFCW, who has a group called Coffee Workers of the South United that have unionized multiple locations in Nashville at this point, and have been taking a lot of actions, including a strike, which has closed now multiple Barista Parlor and Three Brothers Coffee locations for weeks because the workers have been on strike. So Lonnie Lee Hood, who is, I would say they're a friend of the show. I have attended some of their trainings, and you know, definitely not as close with them as we are with some other people, but they do a lot of good work. And they wrote for the Tennessee Lookout, which is the Tennessee State Newsroom Project, kind of like their equivalent of our Alabama Reflector.
Oh, cool.
They wrote, multiple Barista Parlor locations and Three Brothers Coffee remain closed after weeks of failed union negotiation efforts and unexplained terminations. Employees at both companies say baristas have major concerns about the coffee industry in Nashville because of multiple closures, terminations, and low or stolen wages. Golden Sound, a Barista Parlor location in the Gulch, closed almost 2 months ago now. Some employees were transferred to the Germantown location before all but 3 were fired without warning on June the 14th. A Barista Parlor worker said management attempted to have a one-on-one meeting with staff in order to terminate them, but the group demanded to meet together. The 3 staff members who were not terminated quit in solidarity. The entire staff of the Hillsboro Village location also walked out, citing similar concerns about working condition, understaffing, wages, and job security. Kat Knoll, who has worked at Barista Parlor for a year and a half, says Lonnie Lee Hood, said workers have experienced hundreds of dollars in wage theft in just the last few months. Knoll said management promised to repay those wages, but this was in addition to hours being cut and company favorites being given better shift times and assignments, which Knoll says puts stress on baristas trying to make ends meet. Shorter shifts mean slimmer paychecks. Three Brothers Coffee closed later on June the 13th, which is the same day that Coffee Workers of the South United posted their decision to strike to the union's Instagram page. We covered that decision, I think, on the show. We covered something that they did. I think it was their decision to strike. All 5 employees are union members, and they say that management has not negotiated in good faith and will not increase wages to the requested $16 an hour. They've also been picketing outside the shop, and Paige Lemon, a Three Brothers barista for more than a year, said that paying $1,200 a month has always been hard, but it's been even more difficult on strike. And just for comparison, which we talked about last time, the current living hourly wage for single adults in Nashville is $18 an hour. Knoll said she made $13 as a shift leader, but starting wages at Barista Parlor are $11 an hour, which is not very much anywhere, but certainly not very much in Nashville. Three Brothers starting wages are even lower than that at $9.50 an hour, which is half of the county's living wage. And some coffee shops in Nashville have job listings between $16 and $25 an hour. So they are really kind of below the curve in Nashville. And what's even more crazy about these groups of stores is that these are, they call themselves, quote, third wave coffee shops, which Lemon says means specialty coffee drinks, latte art, and an attention to detail that prompted managers at Three Brothers to only hire baristas with experience despite the low wages. So we're only going to pay you $9.50 an hour, but you have to have years of experience as a barista to get this amazing job. And so Lemon says that third wave shops offer an elevated aesthetic and workers who focus on getting a perfectly tamped espresso shot, the right percentages of caffeine, and creating an elevated atmosphere that's attractive to visitors and college students. So this is supposed to be like super duper fancy, you know. I mean, Starbucks,
upscale.
Yeah, upscale stuff, and often ringing up drinks more than $10 per drink, which is like as much as they make an hour. One drink is how much they make in 1 hour. Crazy. Lemon says that owners should stop chasing an unsustainable third wave aesthetic if they aren't willing to properly invest in their business. Which is obvious. Lemon also said that there are people who are interested in that artisan work, but the owners are more interested in the popularity. You want a good cup of coffee, but don't want to give us training on how to do that. It's not third wave coffee anymore. It's confusing. If you want the product, like some of the other chain style shops are, make that clear. You're just churning out lattes. So while the union has gotten some negative comments online, both Noel and Lemon say regulars at the shops are supportive. So that's really good to hear. We mentioned earlier about the allegations of wage theft. Barista Parlor offered a statement to Tennessee Lookout saying that the employees are lying. In their statement, they said Barista Parlor vehemently denies any claims that the company tolerated or condoned abusive working conditions, withheld tips, or stole wages from its employees. We are disappointed by the false and unjustified narrative that a few former employees have perpetuated. Barista Parlor prides itself on its community roots, ethical products, and our culture. We offer competitive wages among the top of our industry peers, which we just debunked, as well as attractive benefits, including 401k match, health insurance, free coffee, and PTO potential. Noel said that she never received any time off, and management did not answer to a follow-up questions about that portion of their statement. So, yeah, really crazy stuff going on in the Nashville coffee scene, but all power to the workers who are fighting for what they deserve. And,
Absolutely.
We're going to keep our eyes on that situation.
Yeah, definitely sending our love and solidarity to all those coffee workers and wishing you all the success in this organizing campaign. I hope you get what you deserve. It's interesting that we talk about this today because just this morning, before I left the house, I was tipped off about a story in Montgomery, Tomatino's Pizza, where they had the gall to say when they were closing that business cannot sustain itself due to inflation, post-COVID inflated wages, overhead, and employee theft of property.
Oh.
Now, would you be surprised to hear that some of the employees of said closed pizza shop are claiming they haven't been paid their last checks? So we'll see what happens there. I encourage folks to contact the Department of Labor and reach out to them. And if that happens to you, certainly encourage you to do that. But yeah, all power to these workers in Nashville and certainly these workers in Montgomery. Hope you get your wages, and keep us posted.
Yeah, and there is still more in that article on the Tennessee Lookout by Lonnie Lee Hood. So,
yeah, definitely check
it
that
out. Yeah, for sure. And follow them on Twitter at, I think it's just at Lonnie Lee Hood. So yeah, follow them on Twitter. So we got about 10 minutes left in the how long we would regularly go, Adam. So what do you want to hit next?
Well, I'm just going to go through and kind of mention some of the stories that we've been talking about or that we were interested in talking about, and maybe just talking it out. We can figure it out, if that makes sense. So a few that we meant to get to earlier this morning, and actually I do know one that I certainly want to talk about, which is NEA in AFSFE. I definitely want to talk about that one just because of its timely nature. But we also have some news on the campus workers, United Campus Workers here in Alabama, taking an action in Tuscaloosa. There are updates in Austin, Texas. Austin, Texas has seen some big wins for their educators, but also continued strike or lockout. Not quite sure. With the nurses in Austin. We've also got issues going on with Maximus, particularly in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, home of the University of Southern Mississippi. So I know a couple of our CWA brothers here in Huntsville made the drive down to Hattiesburg recently to show their support and solidarity. Of course, we've got the Supreme Court up to its bullshit recently. Cop City is also another hot topic going on. And we also got some questions about left organizing, which was interesting, a comment. So how about we talk about the NEA story and then
see where
we go from there.
Let's do it.
So I did want to highlight this one because it, has a special place in my heart, basically. The Association of Field Service Employees, or AFSE, represents some of the employees of the NEA, the National Education Association, which is technically the nation's largest union. I say technically because many of its state affiliates, including the one in Alabama, disavow unionism and instead prefer to be labeled as and operate as so-called professional organizations. This aside, the NEA has been holding its annual representative assembly just this past week, and that is, if I'm not mistaken, the largest democratic deliberative meeting in the world. It's really it's an amazing experience. I got a chance to serve as a delegate. I was elected, I believe, after my second or third year of teaching, and got a chance to go to Denver, Colorado. It was, it was a great experience to get to vote on the direction of the union, to get to speak to items that I supported or opposed, to hook up with like minds and meet up with caucuses. At that time, I remember the Badass Teachers Caucus, the BATS. I remember the NEA Peace and Justice Caucus, which certainly drew me in. But quite a few, and so it's a big deal, and the NEA always has it around the 4th of July. They just held it this, like I said, this past week, so I've seen a lot of teachers talking about it, and I think it's important to share what's been going on behind the scenes there. We all know that folks don't always practice what they preach. We see it with the nonprofit industrial complex. We see it with the supposedly progressive employers, companies that the more foolish among us might label as woke, companies that portray a progressive image while exploiting their workers, engaging in vicious union busting and similar behavior. And unfortunately, we see it sometimes with labor unions and the way they treat their own employees and the staff unions of those employees. And that certainly seems to be the case with the NEA in its dealings with AFSE. Here's one of the latest updates that the AFSE, the Association of Field Service Employees, has shared recently with supporters regarding what's been happening at the Representative Assembly. On Wednesday, the day after NEA management called the cops on AFSE members passing out leaflets, we returned to the NEA Representative Assembly to stand with NEA members at the Freedom to Learn rally. AFSE members work alongside NEA members daily in the struggle to protect public education and the right for all students, educators, and communities to learn and thrive. However, we were denied entrance to the rally and the opportunity to stand with NEA members in solidarity. After being prevented from attending the Freedom to Learn rally, AFSE members gather to talk with NEA members, take photos, and share our flyers. We were once again approached by a convention security officer and told we could not distribute information about our union. We then unfurled our small banner and stood silently in the convention center concourse while members stopped to greet us, take photos, and show their support for the staff union. After standing peacefully with our banner for 10 minutes, we were confronted by convention security. NEA members witnessed convention security ordering us to put away our banner and leave the premises. NEA members stood with us, denouncing this blatant attack on our freedom of speech, and were brought to tears as security staff threatened to have AFSCME members removed if we did not cease spreading our, quote, propaganda. So let's all be honest here. All that AFSCME members have done this week is quietly and joyfully share flyers and stickers, occasionally hold some signs, and reconnect with amazing leaders and members with whom we work side by side all year long. Our goals have been honesty and fairness, not disruption nor discord. But maybe NEA management finds honesty and fairness disruptive. Almost all of the security guards and Orange County Sheriff's deputies who confronted, threatened, and expelled us said clearly and specifically that NEA was their client, and the client wanted the union gone. The only exceptions were a few officers who said, quote, the powers that be, or the people running the show, didn't want us sharing our information. While we asked questions about why NEA and law enforcement were limiting our freedom of speech, never receiving a satisfactory answer, we ultimately complied with law enforcement directives every time. AFSCME members are deeply honored to work with and for NEA members and are grateful and proud of those who have expressed solidarity with us this week. Thank you, truly. We are also sorry that so many had to witness NEA management demonstrating the most blatant hypocrisy. On a day when NEA defended the, quote, freedom to learn, AFSCME members and NEA members were denied their freedom of speech. AFSCME will never stop fighting for NEA members, and NEA members showed they stand with the union in our fight for a fair contract that our members deserve. I want to just say that having worked for an NEA affiliate before, these hardworking folks definitely deserve to get a fair contract. It's, ridiculous that they would be treated this way by NEA management, to have the cops called on them. But I also know that whether it's NEA or their affiliates, they really hate when the members find out that there's internal labor strife. They really hate when members hear directly from the staff union. That's something that really threatens them, I suppose. They feel threatened by it, I should say. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have to be threatening, but that's how it's perceived by them. And so to even acknowledge that, hey, we have a staff union and our staff union has issues with with the management of the association, to even go that far is a step too far for some of these folks in management. And, I can't help but wonder if some of that is connected to their broader philosophy in the way in which they have one foot in the labor movement, one foot out. And yeah, they're the largest union, but don't necessarily call us a union depending on where we're at. I can't help but wonder if maybe some of that bleeds over into the culture internally and the way in which it treats its employees. I remember NISO, the NEA staff organization, who would be the professional employees of the NEA, primarily at NEA, based out of NEA headquarters at least. They had a really tough contract fight a couple years ago that we reported on the Valley Labor Report. And myself personally, I experienced union busting from the Alabama Education Association management, red baiting, retaliation, collusion with the school district leadership, you name it. So, really just sending my best to the Association of Field Service employees. Keep staying strong, keep organizing, keep staying true to your union values, and remember why you do the work that you do. And don't ever forget that you're there for the members. And, what you're fighting for ultimately is in the best interest of the members. And what's best for the members is really going to be what's best for the students. So, you just keep that in mind and stay strong.
Absolutely. You want to hit one more before we head out? Or you want to go ahead and wrap it up?
What you got?
We can do this about the campus workers. We weren't able to get that.
We did want to talk about that in the main show this morning, but want to make sure we do discuss that.
Yeah, so last month, members of the United Campus Workers of Alabama, Communication Workers of America Local 3965, delivered a petition to the Board of Trustees of the University of Alabama system when they met on June the 8th in Tuscaloosa. The petition calls for the extension of health care benefits to all UA employees, including part-time faculty and graduate workers. The union says that this is necessary because in previous years, adjunct faculty at UA had access to the university health care plan. But after the passage of the Affordable Care Act, UA excluded adjuncts from coverage. Graduate workers have access to a student health plan, but the coverage has left many students uninsured and saddled with medical debt due to poor coverage. The Crimson White, which is the student newspaper at the University of Alabama, had a good article about that. And in their article, they quote one of the union members saying that UA's marketing slogan is "Where legends are made, but making legends requires that our campus be a place where people are empowered to be their best so that they can become the best." P.D. Edgar, an M.A. journalism and M.F.A. creative writing student, said. Regardless of how invested we are educationally, legends will fail if they can't get glasses or dental care or a surgery our current insurance calls non-emergency. That has to change for us to really be a place that puts our money where our mouth is. So really good stuff there from the Crimson White. The petition calls for the reinstatement of affordable subsidized access to university-sponsored health insurance for all adjuncts, and that graduate workers and all part-time workers be given the same health care plans as faculty and staff at affordable subsidized rates. The petition also calls for a needs assessment so the university community can ensure all workers have equitable access to all critical services, including mental health care. So really good news there for university workers at the University of Alabama. Here is hoping that the Board of Trustees reverses their decision from almost 10 years ago when they kicked adjuncts off of their health insurance.
Yeah, absolutely. Shout out campus workers for doing that. I think that's a great action that you took, and really appreciate what you're doing, and I hope it spreads the word and more folks do get involved in the union and strengthen the union because, y'all need it for sure.
Yeah. With that, we're going to go ahead and wrap up. Like I said at the top of the show, next week we're going to be talking to Teddy Ostro.
Really looking forward to that. I just listened to his episode on Citations Needed, and it was a great episode and really enjoyed that. So, which also, by the way, our dear brother Maximilian Alvarez was on Citations Needed recently, talking about an issue that we covered on the show, the Obama Netflix series. And so
is his articles in Dissent magazine out yet?
I'm not sure that it's out yet. I know he's been working on it. He was still working on it at the time of the Citations Needed episode, but he had already watched the series oh my God, I don't know how many times he had said he had watched it at that point. Like at least 8 times he's watched the whole series.
Oh no, that sounds terrible.
It sounds so brutal, and probably especially brutal for Max, considering like how it definitely is a weird ripoff, pseudo take on his kind of work, and so. Yeah, I just wanted to shout out those episodes. I always like it when friends of the show are doing cool things. And you were on America's Workforce Union Radio this week, and I will be on it next week.
Very cool.
I will be on it on the 12th. You were on, the 5th?
Yes, that's right.
So definitely check out America's Workforce Radio. It's a union talk radio show up in Ohio, hosted by Ed Flash Ferentz. It's 5 days a week. It's been going on for
30 years.
30 years.
Yeah.
30 years going strong. And they have been supporters of this program. And, between Jacob and I, we're on at least once a month. And so we really appreciate them doing that and appreciate the collaboration.
Yep.
And if there's any other union radio shows out there or, union-friendly, labor-friendly radio shows, podcasts that are out there, hit us up. And, if our schedules allow, we would like to do some collaboration for sure.
Yeah. So make sure that you tune in to the show next week. We're going to be talking to Teddy Ostro to help us contextualize the contract negotiations right now. And in particular, we're going to be talking about the 97 strike. So it's going to be good stuff. So with that, we're going to go ahead and roll out. Appreciate everybody's time. See you next week.
Bye, y'all.